Live, yo.
Okay. All right, I see. Thank you guys so much for the the little bit of a wait. We were supposed to go live at 1:30, but due to some technical issues on my end, we delayed it a little bit. I'm actually going to take just a quick moment to get this URL and broadcast it out to Twitter real quick because they're probably wondering.
Good call. Like, where is he? What is happening right now? I'm actually sharing. We're simulcasting this to our So Local Live Facebook page where we host #coffee every Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 10 a.m. Of course, anyone is welcome to join us there. I've actually been punching that to my Twitter as well, which is how Seth has been joining us some mornings, which is fantastic. And of course, you can follow me at Corey Cottrell on the Twitter. I'm going to share this out too on there. Is it annoying or like blasé when people say things like the Twitter?
The Twitter. It's kind of boomer-esque, but I'll allow it.
Okay. Well, I think that's sort of what I meant. Like, did I just age myself by calling it the Twitter?
At least 10 years.
Okay, fair enough. Shit.
All right.
There.
You know, the one thing that I love so much about my follower base here at the Dividend Report is that they're so patient when it comes to the technical issues that I have, because it does not fail. Every single time that I've tried to go live, I've had some issue. It happened the last time I was on #coffee with you and Greg, and they're so supportive no matter what. So I appreciate you guys. And the tweet's been sent out. So Corey, welcome to the Dividend Report. Thank you so much for joining me and helping me with my tech issues. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I actually just finished, before getting on here, a conversation with a 21-year-old co-founder of AtomicHub.io. Those crazy psychos are going to change the gaming universe forever. Not to mention like collectibles.
Is this the same owner that you were talking about with the interview you had with James talking about Chirp?
Yes, maybe.
He did something with Wizards, and now he's also doing Chirp.
No, that's Kurt. That's my my co-founder of Chirp. I guess I have like co-founder status on Chirp, which always feels weird to say because I see how much work the dev guys do, and all I am is a glorified cheerleader / brainstorming guy. But I guess freaking Steve Jobs couldn't code for shit. So
yeah, right. It's
for the record,
vision.
I am not Steve Jobs. Just that was sort of intimated there.
From what I know about Steve Jobs, I don't think it would be that much of a stretch to put yourself on the same level.
I think settle down.
You know what? We really like to glorify billionaires and think that there's some sort of like super genius person, but I don't think that's the case. I think that's a mistake to do.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I just watched the Steve Jobs movie for the first time. I don't know how I didn't see it before. But I like the way that they portrayed that he was sort of looking at it from the gestalt big picture down, right? Like the user experience was the only thing, right? And to I think the penultimate moment in the whole movie is when, his kid just randomly gets a hold of the kind of the first Mac and finds paint and makes a painting, and he's like, he knew right then and there, right? In the same way that the iPhone is so intuitive. As a system that, of course, we all kind of use that kind of screen, finger technology or whatever. It's so intuitive that kids just get it. Like, you just do it, right? And over this last year, since I minted the Shipple token and like some wallets came out where like cryptocurrency wallets that were designed from the ground up so that anyone could just do it from the beginning. Like it was intuitive enough that you could just figure it out. So we're starting to see that in the space. And Kurt is that person, right? Like I really love kind of bragging up people, in this space. And so I think that's sort of why ChirpCast started, right? I get to introduce the Chirp as a social media platform, but also, people like you who I'm, basically going to be dragging over there and forcing them to start channels. There's actually a lot of other people that are like super excited about doing it anyway, but I want to make sure that people get over there to kind of do that community development, because we're fighting giants standing on the shoulders of giants with the network effect of things like Twitter and Facebook. So
yeah, that's on the one hand, and on the other hand too, you're trying to push forward the missing part of cryptocurrency and blockchain is the adoption and the utility too.
Yep.
So people like you are necessary, because the tech wizards, the gurus, the geniuses behind the scene that are making these things happen, they don't they'd have to be the ultimate, mind to be able to do both at one time. So I think, I can guarantee you that most of my audience probably is completely confused as to what we're saying right now. We went off the edge. I want to start from the layman's perspective when it comes to cryptocurrency, and this is a simultaneous cast. So I'm thinking that what we'll do is at the end of the discussion that I have with you concerning, I want to talk about moving forward briefly and the transition that you're going through right now. I want to talk about the other spaces that you're in that includes cryptocurrency, but also this music career startup that I'm hearing is kind of maybe taking off.
We could sort of talk about that in the well, maybe that might be part of the ChirpCast thing too, because it's only because of me reaching out to different projects in the cryptocurrency and blockchain space that all of this happened. And it all happened within the space of 4 hours yesterday. I went from literally not giving a shit about my own music career and I'm good at other stuff. I am by far best at music. I don't mind saying it because I put decades into it. You should at least not be horrible. But I'm stoked, man. I'm genuinely excited in a way that I haven't been in basically a decade.
Dude, all right, this is perfect. Let's just start here. I'll roll along with it, but I have a feeling it'll guide itself. I wanted to get an idea of how long have you been podcasting for? This is what, your third podcast today?
Yes, it is actually. This is my third podcast today. So I started audio podcasting probably 5 years ago. That's how I met my co-host on #Coffee, Greg. He was doing an audio podcast as well. The second that the Facebook Live button showed up, I realized that this was a total phase change, and immediately started almost every set that I did live as a working musician. I was doing 3-4 gigs a week. I was punching live to Facebook. The quality was terrible. It was you could go back and probably find the earliest ones. It was god awful. People loved it. Right. And because it was that kind of immediate sort of access window, right, to how this goes. So I knew that podcasting was going to go in that direction. And of course it has. I started doing something called Coffee on the Dock. We lived on the water. So I just went out. I basically challenged myself for 90 days, go out every single morning and have coffee, on the dock. The name was super imaginative, and not have any plan. I'm just going to go on. I'm going to turn the camera on. We're going to see what happens. That actually turned into I had advertisers within a year. It was a real thing that kind of grew up around that. Yeah. And then, I moved, so we just changed it to #Coffee. And, I've been doing it with Greg distance, right? We used to sit in the same, on the same dock for this whole thing. And now the technology evolved so that we don't have to do that. And then of course, a little over a year ago, I started moving forward with Rio and co-founded Chirp, or got a co-founder status, I guess, with Chirp, the social media thing that we'll talk about later, and started a podcast around that because I just see how much it can create cohesion and community, and that's really what I think the space needs. So yeah.
100%. And I mean, one thing leads to another. It's a testament to you really just kind of just doing it, just putting the effort in. And it's something that I struggle with. And it's why I'm really asking you this question, because I've found in my efforts through the Dividend report that I'm a maladaptive perfectionist, in a sense that I am unable to, it sounded like James was talking to you, Ellers. Is that pronunciation? Ellers?
Sure. I don't know.
he was saying, I need to produce content more regularly. I struggle, and I'm happy to be doing these interviews because I will, do 12 hours of recording in a day, editing, and then scrap it all the next day and never get anything through. And I have followers who really want to hear what I have to say. And, I know that I'm leaving them kind of out in the dust. And so I want to say, I apologize to the people who have missed me for the past 4 months. But it's not because I've just been a grifter and I left people out to the dust. Did you struggle to get over some kind of creative hurdle to continue to just do it every single day, or does it come naturally to you?
So this is something I talk with Kurt about all the time, because Kurt is a hyper perfectionist. As you can see from my background, I am not. Mm-hmm. Right? Although usually Brian is over there, and just having the dog there makes me look cool. I mean, that just, that works out really well. But so I wanted to, let's put this into context. How many subscribers do you have on YouTube?
It was a little bit intimidating when I saw my video hit 60,000 views in one video.
Right. So subscribers, you're in the thousands, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got about 1,100 on Facebook after 3 years, and I think 200 on our YouTube channel. Right. So I think the level of perfectionism that you have, that gene that you have that makes you want to perfect stuff, is extremely valuable. Don't knock yourself for that. Don't let it run your life, for sure. Right? Like, I think rule number 1 has to be, you have to put content out. And rule number 2 is you make it as good as you possibly can so that it doesn't drive you nuts, because that, like, whatever drive you have to make things better is working. Right? Now, your fans are absolutely right, because depriving them of your voice in this moment is fucking criminal.
Yeah.
Because you're stupid smart, and like, it just, your perspective has been important enough that I think it's an extremely valuable thing in this moment that is very fraught, right? So you kind of owe it to us, dude. Come on.
Yeah. I want to give you and Rio some credit, because like 2 things happened in the past month which have been very formative to my grand return. One, Blair Walsingham won her primary in District 1, Tennessee, nearby me. And I think this is huge for a multitude of reasons, and I'm hoping to interview her. She's given me a type of energy that I haven't felt since Yang was running for office. Awesome. And 2, your conversation with Rio, the co-host's quarrel I was listening to, and I can tell that was an emotional breakup, and it's been hard, but really what you guys have been through and what you guys produced with the 130 episodes of the Moving Forward podcast is a testament to so much. I want to see that continue, and Rio has reached out to me to be a co-host. And I initially was thinking that I was going to completely decline, because I was like, well, if you've fallen out with the progressive voice that Corey was able to give, what makes you think it's going to be any different with me? After hearing you guys talk about it, you did such a good job, and you've given me this type of energy to say my voice is necessary right now. I have to speak. If I'm not running for office, I need to do whatever it is, whatever my personality, my character traits can allow me to do to try and change the world. Hopefully this can be the situation. So thank you. Thank you both for doing that. We're going to talk about your breakup with Moving Forward, but real quick, do you have anything to comment on regarding that rant that I just went off?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing is, like, I really want, I think he's looking at AJ, he's looking at Joshua from New Progressive Voice. Basically, like, everybody he mentioned to me, or people I like genuinely like a lot, right? So I guess the one thing that I'll add there, and we'll go into why probably in a little bit longer thing, is your concern about, if it didn't work with me, why would it work with other people? I think is genuine, and I think I want to place that on the table as a warning. I don't know if it'll work. I hope it will. And we kind of bounce past my concerns in that episode, because quite frankly, Rio's not that interested in them at all, and they're real, right? Like, I'm the never Trumper Republicans, just to throw the issue out in a nutshell, made Faustian bargains with racists for 50 years. Mostly on the sly, right? And enough so that Rio can say personally, like, I was never for the Southern strategy. But then he brings a racist on our show who's supposed to be a Democrat. And that's, he's saying, like, you need to be trying to court this guy's vote. I'm like, well, this sounds familiar. And that's what broke me. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. Knowing what I know about history and about how the two parties have been, running in the United States for the last 50 years. I saw where all of this could be headed, and I can't be a part of helping that happen. And I could be wrong, right? Like, that's always a possibility too. There's too much evidence for the fact that I'm not. And I felt like my energy could be better used elsewhere. Now, the core construct of the Moving Forward podcast is that, you finally have people on the right and people on the left having a conversation. And that is going to be a conversation that happens in the Democratic Party now, because the Republican Party is going to die or we're fucked. Like, those are the two options, right? So, like, I personally want to see that conversation continue, knowing full well that it will be challenging and that, I sort of hit my limit. But yeah, like it could just end up being where you guys start to see what I saw, and I hope this is true. I hope that you guys work that through to the point, like, as a collective, as a group, right? Not just you, but, AJ and Josh, but everybody else. I hope that either gets solved for in a very constructive way, which is possible, or that I get proven wrong, which would make me even happier.
Yeah. And there was another part of your perspective, though, is that you also are from Canada. You're a dual citizen.
Actually, I'm just a green card holder.
Oh, you're not American.
That's correct. I just play one on TV.
All right, well, that does it for the episode, guys.
And scene.
Yeah. All joking aside, though, you bring something that's necessary, and I mean, first of all, I don't even know if I consider myself "quote unquote" progressive. I think you and I would have a lot more moments where it was like we agreed when we were having our conversations on the Moving Forward podcast, and I almost felt bad because it's like, oh well, we're teaming up on Rio in some way. So I tried my best to be more of the middle ground, but honestly, I didn't have to try that hard. And I think that is more of a saying of what it means to be like left in America. I think that you have a perspective that we would view as more extreme, but it's actually more mainline left in other parts of the world.
I mean, the Democratic Party in the rest of the world is center right, with the right capitalized, right? Mm-hmm. So the Overton window is shift. Well, I mean, we could see it, right? It's shifted so far to the right that the Republicans are fascist psychos now. Like, that's like, wait, what? Which is less than ideal. But yeah, I mean, the rest of the world, when you look at Europe, like Canada's like kind of, center left-ish, but not even that much. And again, when you look at, the rankings for all the countries in the world that are the best to live in ranked by their own citizens and everywhere else, all the top countries are center left. It's just like, it's a better way to run civilization so that everyone is taken care of and happy. But you could still get rich. You could still do like all the stuff that, everybody rants and raves about being able to do in America. That's still there. We just also, don't let homeless people just die of starvation, hunger, or cancer.
Yeah, 100%. And like, that's where I'm going to wind up, I feel, in any conversation with Rio. I do think that okay, well, as a side note, I wish that I had been keeping up with the Moving Forward podcast on my own time and with #coffee, but I will admit, this is going back to my perfectionism. I hate watching and listening to everything that you guys produce because I have such a fundamental respect for what you guys are bringing to the table. You guys are extremely good at what you do, and it makes me constantly judge what I'm producing. So I just try to keep you guys out of my mind, and I feel bad for that because I'm left with I might cover ground that's already been covered in conversations that I might have with you. So what does that have to do with anything? My mind constantly goes off on tangents, and I'm trying to fix that.
No, don't try and fix it. I think what I would recommend, if I could be so bold as to recommend anything to a guy with a channel who's much larger than mine, is deal with it. I think celebrate that instead of judging it. Like the tangents is what allows, especially because we're kind of doing long form stuff, right? It's not like, and I know you prepare for stuff. If you like the joke for #coffee is that every once in a while we do, and that's always hilarious because we usually don't. Those tangents can well, it's like what you did this morning, right? Like #coffee is very much sort of comment driven. Like we've got 20 to 40 people that are basically on every show. It's kind of more of a community than like Greg and I are just kind of the nodes in that community that are funneling what is on all of our collective minds into how we sort of carry on the conversation. But it produces that novelty. So you came on, you commented about the possibility that or questioning whether entheogens can have an effect on narcissism, and that was like the best show we've had in a while. We've had some really good ones in a while, right? So I think that level of novelty doesn't show up unless you're kind of open to and accepting of where tangents can take you.
Yeah. I think I like that. I just need to work on being able to tie it back into a more cohesive understanding, because I was going somewhere with it and it just completely ends. So I'm extremely attention deficit. Yeah.
That just happens, man. It's like when you're handling, like you're juggling like 4 or 5 different concepts. Dude, that happens that at least once an episode where I'm like, I have this 3 to 5 point arc in my head, and I get to 2 and I'm like, fucking turtles, god damn it. And I just like, it's all over.
Right. And that's the value of a co-host. The co-host is able to bring it back in ways that he can't. And I just have to keep doing it. I'm overcoming my own hurdle there. So in the same way here, I finally thought about it enough, and I said, I'm going to accept this. I'm going to be a progressive voice on with Rio, and hopefully it will work out.
I'm glad.
Yeah. And I hope to see you back there too. What I gathered from your quarrels, co-host quarrel is that, it was having an emotional effect on you, a negative effect, constantly having to be like, well, this is just something that I'm not really agreeing on. Was that cumulative, or did it really start happening after Yang left the race?
No, so when Yang left the race, that didn't do it at all. I guess, like, looking back, this didn't really do it, but it comes up a lot when I think about it. Rio decided to bring on what he called a smart Trump supporter, right? And of course, I have a strict ban on Trump supporters on any media that I do, and that will be maintained for all time. They should be quarantined and separated from general society, period. But we negotiated. This is like a friend of his for years and years and years, and he's like a smart, still Republican. The guy was a dime store shithead Republican, like just brutally, up to the point where he was actually using Nazi slogans on a show that I helped to build, right? We don't have a giant audience, but we have some audience. So I keep thinking back, like, I helped platform this. And that's something I think about a lot, right? Like, other people want to have conversations with everybody, and I respect them for it. That might be the way to do it. For me, the only real power that we have online is editorial control. And we need to exercise it because nobody else is, right? Like that editorial control is just like people are just sharing whatever happens. And I think there's something there that won't leave me alone. So that's just a hard rule, right? Like, I've got the airlock online. If you spread conspiracy nonsense, I turf you off social media. Family members, friends, doesn't matter. You're gone, and I won't let you back. So here I am platforming a fucking Nazi, right? And so that was one thing, and it was jokey, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And if you go back and listen to the last 20 episodes of the Moving Forward podcast, anytime it comes up, like, I ruthlessly busted his balls about it and would continue to. But the thing that did it, like, he brought this guy on. He's like, no, Corey, this guy's a Democrat. And, he just really is, I'm basically supposed to be really mad at the defund the police slogan, and Black Lives Matter is going to hurt us, and yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, dude, no. Right. And it's one thing to have a conversation about that. And it's another thing he said, like, definitely don't go to his Twitter page, though. I'm like, red flag, right? You go to his Twitter page, the guy's a fucking racist, right? Like, his Twitter page reads like Breitbart's front page when it doesn't look like the fucking Daily Stormer, like a white nationalist, like, headline aggregator, right? He's like, no. He's like having rational conversations with me, Rio said, and it should all be fine. Well, it wasn't, right? If you go back and listen to the episode, within 25 seconds, he's talking about the 1619 Project, which is basically a bunch of black people actually going back and looking at the real history of slavery. And white people fucking hate it.
And he's framing that as like some kind of deeper, sinister. Okay.
Well, and from there to the fact that Black Lives Matter is, infested with socialists and Marxists. And that's where I fucking lost it. Because I've been having again, dime store, very intellectually incapable Republicans call me a socialist, and everyone else I know a socialist and a communist and a Marxist forever. And in fact, it's exactly what they called MLK. It's how they dismiss you. Right. So am I going to be part of a podcast and spending a lot of my time and all of my worrying time, because I have been concerned about whether or not this is the right thing for me to put my energy into? Is this something that I want to keep doing?
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And something that I struggle with personally is that, I've got family members who are pretty down the line Trump supporters, and it's difficult to have that, like, in the pursuit that I'm wanting to do, because, I can't really talk about anything other than politics in my social circles. That's a hard thing to overcome. And I heard Rio talking similarly about that. And I have like this inner desire to try and correct, because the same thing happened with me, where I was trying to explain what Black Lives Matter was about, because I always tried to imagine that I wasn't racist growing up, because that's just your natural inclination to do. You want to defend your worldview and say, well, there's no way.
Yeah, of course.
Right. And really in the past 6 months, it has been an eye opener for me. And I think a lot of other Americans, whereas, a Canadian, again, like we were talking about, it might not be so eye opening for you. Like, this is big knowledge.
I think I romanticized Canada as kind of that, like what you're suggesting, right? Like as this place where we don't really do racist. And in Yellowknife, where I'm from, like up in the Arctic, we had racism, but like basically like the Inuit and white people were like kind of half on par population wise, right? And I feel like you really got more of, and this definitely wasn't universal, but because you're so isolated, because it's so cold, it kind of creates this necessity of community. But even that, I think was a little bit romanticized for me, right? And if you look at the Canadian government, like the way they treat like the native population is really bad. It's brutal, right? So like it's not like we don't have it in Canada. We absolutely do. And I think to your point, what maybe people like us have been experiencing, and I absolutely have, considering myself to not only be for sure not racist, because I would call out racists in Pasco County where I gigged all the time in Florida, all the fucking time. I was also not immune still to biases that I was not aware of. Right. And to a lack of understanding of just how messed up it is, in a lot of Black communities in America still, right? Like just how much they have to face on any given day. And that it would absolutely, like, if this was happening to us, Seth, we would be fucking burning shit down. Like, I honestly think that we would be. The amount of restraint that they have managed to imbue into the culture of their protests is heroic. Yeah.
And honestly, that's a darker part of it is I think that we know deep down, like, well, if this is the way that minorities are treated, what's going to happen if I'm suddenly the minority? You're going to expect, why would you expect any differently?
Well, and that's, this is the thing. Like, I think you're totally right. I think that's part of why we see the backlash sometimes that we do, but I don't personally get that, right? Like, like for example, like Ruth Bader Ginsburg once was asked, like, how many women should there be on the Supreme Court? She said 9, and they were, of course, shocked. Right? Like, what do you mean 9? Like, don't you want equality? No, like it managed to run really fine with 9 men for a long time. Like, why not 9 women? And that like initial, like, oh, what? Right? Like, I'm personally now at the point where, like, looking at the women leaders in the world, like, we should give them at least 100 years and back the fuck off, because we're not good at this at all. But I think in the same way, like, if I have to feel a little bit of discomfort, let's face facts, like that, because as again, like, people that have lived in privilege for a really long time, equality will feel like loss, right? Like that leveling out or whatever, people can experience a lot of challenge from that, but like, not really, right? It's not real loss.
Yeah. It's the zero sum fallacy, believing
right.
that the pie is only one size. Yeah.
Right. And if you have to feel a little bit uncomfortable in your sort of journey to realizing that, then so fucking be it, right? Like that's my clearly humble take on that.
Yeah. Yeah. As my own perspective has been widened beyond where it was before, which I would say is much less racist than the rest of the country, but now I'm really starting to perceive like the biases, the harder part of understanding the problem. And as it hits me, it becomes much, much harder to tolerate the same type of rhetoric that I have told myself, that I've accepted in the past. And I can see how hard that is, because I'm experiencing it with my relationship with my own family member, and so I can completely understand why you made the decision that you did make. But at the same time, I'm still holding on to this hope that like that can be countered in a one-on-one conversation.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and I mentioned this in the chat that Rio and I had. Like, I can imagine a far more patient and enlightened version of myself that could speak to the race relations question in a way that could sort of encompass the good person that I know Rio is on good days and definitely aspires to be on all days. I mean, like the rest of us, I'm busting his balls right now, unfairly.
Yeah.
I don't have that. I don't have that in me, and I knew it. Right? Like, if you're gonna basically just like immediately we're talking about Black Lives Matter, you immediately start talking about Marxists. I'm just gonna get fucking angry because it's so stupid. Like, is there a Marxist on Twitter that associates with Black Lives Matter? Sure, but that's been the same thing that the Republican Party has been doing to dismiss anyone who steps out of line for so long that it's just sad. Like, McCarthyism died for a reason, right? And you can see it in me right now, right? Like, I'm just like, like, and that was just happening over and over and over again. And that, to me, especially in this like 2020, everything's kind of crap, was actually having a cumulative effect. So I was getting worse at it over time, not better.
Right. Yeah.
So that's the main reason why I had to step away and find something kind of more effective that I could do with my time. And thankfully I did. We'll talk about that later. But I'm hoping that with an army of progressives that just, you guys are super smart and in so many ways a lot more capable and smarter than me. And Rio, to his undying credit, and I mean this, he is willing to have that conversation just ad nauseum, right?
Yeah.
And he's going to inject it with his like stupid upbringing of being a Republican. Sorry, Rio, but not sorry enough to shut up about it. Like, that's going to happen, right? And I'm never going to be okay with that. But I'm at least cautiously optimistic that between a lot of you, you can help to shift the conversation into a constructive direction.
Yeah. And I
won't, again, rat fuck the Democratic Party, because left to his own devices, and Rio doesn't want to do this. This is not, he doesn't see it this way. But I absolutely do. If left to their own devices, the Never Trumper Republicans will completely rat fuck the Democratic Party in exactly the same way, with little Faustian bargains every election cycle that they did to the Republican Party. And they don't see it that way either. They're definitely not ready to take responsibility for it. But it's absolutely because of what they did and or allowed to have happen.
Right. I wish that I had said this also a little earlier, because I have a feeling that Rio may watch this. He may not. I reached out to both of you at the same time, and I was like, I want to do a post autopsy on the Moving Forward podcast, or what had been before the transition now. And I want both of y'all's permission and to talk about this with each person one-on-one.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. No, I'm expecting he'll see this, and I know I'm saying a lot of kind of harsh things or whatever, but it's nothing he doesn't know.
So hopefully I'll timestamp at like 34 and say, this is where I try and bring the conversation to bring it back a little bit, and
right.
And because as I was listening to it and getting a different perspective, I could see where Rio was coming from and saying like, well, what's the worst boogeyman, the alt left or the alt right? And I think with enough conversation, it seems clear that like, even if the alt left boogeyman that's being painted is there, it is so much worse to the degree that we probably shouldn't even ask the question, which one's worse, de facto. Like we are on the cusp of fascism. There are people being thrown into vans by unmarked, when you're at that point, that conversation may not really have it may not have merit. Not that it shouldn't happen. It should.
Well, I honestly, like, maybe it shouldn't. I think you're right. Right? Like, if your house is on fire, talking about the fact that you have a leaky faucet in the backyard is not the right time to do it. And that's the level, right? Like it. But again, like Rio's been trained probably from birth or slightly after to be terrified of socialism. Every conversation we've ever had, he's terrified of it. He sees it around every single corner. It's ridiculous, but it's real for him, right? And so any suggestion by anyone credible in that space that anybody is considering, Marxism, and you'll hear it in his thing all the time. Like anybody who wants, equity, which means we all have exactly the same amount of stuff, and literally no one actually wants that, right? But that's where their head goes, and it's pointless to me that on the cusp of Nazism in America, we're worried about the African American community combined with hordes of white people who are allies going out in the streets and saying, hey, can we please maybe stop murdering black people at an asininely disproportionate rate? But then, if you go back and listen to the episode, Rio wants to talk there about the fact that, people shouldn't misbehave and then maybe they wouldn't get killed.
And I came on the podcast and I spent a lot of time on my own channel really diving into the issue of federal jobs guarantee versus a UBI, because I perceived, and I still am concerned about it, less concerned now, that,
right?
that there is a force on the left and the socialism thing. Now, again, I grew up south, in the southern states. So
sure.
That is in me. It just is in me. It's in the entire country.
It is.
That concern, while I still have it, is just so outweighed by the problems that are in front of me. And I heard Rio continuing to try and like come back to that, to say like, I'm extremely against what's happening right now. It's terrible. Fascism is bad.
Right.
So, that's kind of a moot point that I'm bringing up, I suppose. It's just like, I look back at some of like, as I was trying to write some notes for this conversation, I see all of this stuff that I had written about federal jobs guarantee versus UBI. And it's like, well, that just doesn't matter anymore. It's just,
I think it's important though, in exactly the way that you framed it. The reason, like people think, and it's not an incoherent inference, that the people on the left want the federal jobs guarantee over UBI because they want control. They want to have welfare because they want control. I could tell you that's just not true. What is true is they don't get UBI yet, right? Like, because I have walked many Democrats up and down, sort of the ballot levels now, locally in Florida and elsewhere, through this conversation. And it was my own evolution as well, right? I'm coming from the camp that has to defend, welfare and Medicaid from Paul Ryan, who would literally let his grandmother die if he could get a tax cut, right? And he himself came up on public assistance. Okay, right? That's what I'm used to. Just, there wasn't a better idea. And in the absence of any better idea, you take care of people, period, right? Yeah. Now, that's the problem with the federal jobs guarantee, is that that comes out from the left. Obviously, I think it comes out extremely well intentioned. I think it's trying to play to things on the right about workism and different things or whatever. Right? Like it's trying to say we're only going to benefit people who are working, because one of the criticisms we get all the time is you just want to laze around all the time, yada yada yada. Right? So it's trying to get to the conservative angle for a coalition that way, but of course it's horrific. Like, you think about a federal jobs guarantee under a fascist asshole like Trump, like that's just, you're not good.
Right.
It's really bad, right? So I think what we're seeing in the Democratic Party, and AOC is my favorite example of this. The second that she said that UBI was a Trojan horse for for capitalism or whatever, I was like, this sucks a lot. She's going to come around. Lo and behold, she came around. Right, they're starting to understand that there is a better way, and that just means like I think that's really the only thing that's going on in the left is not some nefarious desire to control the population by keeping them down. In fact, that's really ridiculous. We've just been trying to take care of people, and there wasn't a better idea. And now we're having to do the work of explaining to the rest of the Democrats, like, this is a much better idea.
Yeah. I am so infuriated, and I wish that the work was happening right now, because the last 6 months of this pandemic, which has been so hard on the entire country, on the entire world, the problem that we ran into, I saw coming from a mile away when they passed the first relief package. I was like, if you don't do UBI now, it's over. Our response has failed, because what's going to happen is exactly what happened. You had all of this discussion about, well, you can't pay people more to sit at home. And our failure to confront workism is led us to the point that we are at right now. Our failure to talk about, like, hey, you know what? 40 million unemployed Americans, the shelves are still stocked. Let's finally accept that there is a level of abundance. Let's finally accept that the problem at stake here is a lack of income, not a lack of jobs. That you fix this problem primarily by, lack of income. If we had done that right now, we could have countered the entire narrative that unemployment is making Americans lazy, right? You say, well, if you don't take away the income from the people should they go and choose to work, there is no disincentive. Of course, the establishment, Pelosi and Schumer, never wanted to broach that side of the subject, but they could have countered the narrative. That's where they're failing right now, because look at where we have winded up. Trump trying to pass this bogus executive order saying, oh, look, I'm the savior because your Congress is doing nothing, when we know that's gaslighting us, because 3 months ago they passed something that would have had some real effects in helping the American people.
3 versions of it that were never taken up in the Senate. Yeah, like that I've seen some Yang people do this in a very frustrating way too. That basically Congress isn't doing their job. Andrew Yang did it, right? Well, that again, when anytime you give space to the both sidesism, you're forgetting that Democrats are the only ones that are actually working for people. And they passed bills already. They wanted a $3 trillion stimulus that would have payments going on to everybody right fucking now, and the Republicans wouldn't pass it. While Mitch McConnell's out there saying, oh, the Democrats are holding things up. It's dog shit, right? Every Republican will lie to you every time. Assume that, and every once in a while you'll be wrong and they'll be telling the truth, and yay, right? But it's shocking and freaked out. Because in Canada, you get $2,000 a week. Every 2 weeks.
And it's extremely easy to qualify for that system.
If you're a breathing human, exactly. Everyone got it. Because you want to incentivize people to stay the fuck home, right? And the pandemic's basically handled in Canada, which is why the border's still closed.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to come back to that real quick. I'm going to ask you about how I might become a Canadian citizen, but really quick.
We'll take a bus. No, these guys are all my brothers and sisters and stuff.
And it might seem easy for me to say this in hindsight, because I don't think I should have seen it coming. I don't think that Trump's executive order action, as asinine as it is, I don't think many people saw that coming. I didn't see it coming.
Well, and I don't think it's going to work. I don't think it's going to do anything.
It's not
really
going to work. But American politics.
Warren just corrected me. It's $2,000 a month, not a week. I thought 2 weeks, but $2,000 a month still is 20 times what Americans got.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. 100%.
Thanks, Warren, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wanted to give a shout out to Bob. I think he left the YouTube chat. He was in YouTube, which is a little weird because I'm not seeing any of the. I have to go over to my other window. But thank you for joining. He had mentioned, for me to write down tangents. He was giving me his own advice, which I'm going to absolutely, because look at me, I'm already going off on another tangent here. But the problem is that it's not really what is going to happen or what he can or cannot do. In American politics, the one thing that seems to matter is the narrative, is the perception, and the perception Trump somehow wound up, even though it's not going to work, he won the narrative with that bogus executive order. and it's nonsense, because I could go to my Trump supporting family member right now and say this is why it's nonsense, but I have to be on the defensive. The Democrats are now somehow on the defensive, and when you have to be on the defensive in politics, you've lost. In my opinion, I think that if we had attacked this head on, if we had attacked this bogus narrative where it's like, oh, unemployment is making people stay at home, all they said was, well, that's wrong. They didn't explain like in detail. They didn't actually get into the meat of, well, no, let's actually talk about this, right? How much are all of the Congress people making right now? Wait, we're going to go on vacation and not do anything at all, right? Who is the actual lazy person here? Let's actually talk about laziness. Let's actually talk about value. Let's actually finally confront workism.
Right.
That was the winning play, in my opinion. If I had the choice to tell them how to act, how the Democrats to act right now, that's what I would have focused on 100%.
Yeah, I think we're starting to see these opportunities in the context of our understanding of UBI, I think. And I think and this is why you were saying you're going to be interviewing Blair pretty soon. How do you say her last name?
Walsingham.
By the way, congrats on your victory. So, when AOC and the kind of squad get in there, right? Like that changed the tone to a certain effect in Washington. And it was actually good to see that it actually changed them as well, because they're in Washington. They're seeing the amount of work that gets done. It's not easy or fun. There's probably about 20% of them that are doing 80% of the work, and the rest of them are just, warming seats, which is lame, but kind of true. And what we're going to see now, especially with this cycle, if it's the blowout that honestly, I'm an atheist, but I will still pray. I don't give a shit. Really, we need to win here in a big way. There's some amazing people that are plausibly going to Washington. And I know this is slow. I know it's infuriating. But the ship of the Overton window of what is a sort of acceptable policy thought in America is a slow thing to turn. But I can see it turning, right? And, it's probably going to take another 5 to 10 years, but it looks sort of inexorable at this point. Now, granted, in the meantime, and this is why it's so understandably frustrating, people are suffering a lot, right? And so it's like, what are you clowns doing, right? And I completely get that. It's just when we look at what we can do, the only thing we can do is celebrate those candidates that are coming up that see things in a way that's going to make it easier to have leaders like that in a position to, start ranting at people like Scott Seths. Like, you can imagine, like, I think about this all the time, even while being, I am in Democratic clubs, which I never thought I would do. But again, like, if you want to start where the rubber hits the road, you have to understand how the parties work. And again, until we have ranked choice voting, nothing else matters. It's sad, but it's true, right? This is the system that we have. Learning how Pelosi actually works, but in my private moments, thinking like, if I could just airdrop Scott Sentence into Pelosi's job, just get the hell out of the way. His righteous rage is a thing of beauty and always right.
Yeah, Santins is the reason the dividend report exists. And more so than anything else, we need to celebrate the wins that we see. But we also have to engage with them. And Americans are terrible about this. The majority of us don't vote. And I, for the past 4 months, have sit around feeling sorry for myself, feeling mad at the society. Yeah, I have a lot of good reasons to. A lot of the negative energy that I seemed to feel from you talking about, like, I just can't do this anymore. Because this isn't changing me. It's not changing the world in the way that I want to see it changed. Right. You perceive it, you recognize it, you turn around and you act on that. And that's what I am doing right now. That's why I hope, Blair has the cards stacked against her. It is extremely red in Sevier County, Tennessee. But this is the thing. Sevier County, Tennessee is where terrible, terrible forest fires ravaged hundreds of homes. And Dolly Parton, the person who has East Tennessee under her wings, who has nurtured and made us what we are, the Smoky Mountains with Dollywood, everything, she stood up and said, I'm going to give $1,000 a month to all the families that have been impacted. And after that, we saw a study from the University of Tennessee talking about how cash assistance, far and above everything else, was the most appreciated form of relief. And that happened here in East Tennessee. That happened in the district that Blair is running for. She has the perfect message to actually give herself a chance. And that is, years ago, Sevier County had these fires. Look who helped. Let's compare that to what our Congress is doing right now. Money in your hands is what helps disasters. Disaster relief is cash in the American people's hands. And you can go and see what Dolly did. And I am going to fight for Sevier County to do that. And, I haven't followed that closely on with her messaging and everything, but this is what I'm going to talk to her about. And hopefully in some way or another, my interview with her can be passed around Facebook. We need people talking. That is what we need. We cannot let things just pass without our action. So that's where I'm at right now.
Dude, I mean Jareen just posted that, man, Seth is so good. And I totally agree, which is why I threw it up there. Even if this is on your channel, it might be embarrassing. I don't care because it's true. Yeah, ultimately that's, you gotta figure out where to apply your talents to do stuff that you feel like is going to actually, move the ball forward. And, maybe Blair, loses this time, but in the process of that, she creates infrastructure and teams and, relationships like the one with you. And whatever else we can do, right? And there's a lot of people doing that all over the country. What's really interesting is
there he goes.
Is it your camera?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just keep going, and
no problem.
I'm gonna switch the battery.
Switcheroo. So Trump is having to spend money, just as an example, in Texas. That's crazy, and a lot of that is because Beto and others, not just Beto, but Beto went and did a primary run and went to every single county before that. So he was going for governor, went to every single county in Texas, and there's like 8 million of those, right? And created relationships with all the Democratic parties that have been starving for attention. Nobody's putting money or building relationships in Texas, really. I mean, there were, but not to the extent that's possible. And Texas has been trending to the point where Democrats could have a real shot. It might have been 10 years from now, it might have been 5 years from now, we don't know. But with the work that one guy did, right? And again, it's not to say that there weren't others doing it for the last decade, there are, but in a coordinated effort that kind of pulled it all together as a unit, fundraising got jacked in the whole country, that kind of thing. We see a lot of like real movement now to where people like Donna can potentially win in Austin, and now Republicans are having to spend money all over the frickin' place, which I think is real good, real good.
You're exactly right. And more so than that, look, Cori Bush, right? Yeah. Knocked down the House on Netflix. Yep. She failed the first time. Now she's here.
Right. Exactly. DRS Metal had a comment. What worries me, Biden has no enthusiasm with younger voters. He needs to evolve on social issues. So what I would say about that is that in the context of this particular moment, right? Like Biden will definitely say things that, has, younger voters cringing, understandably. Don't ever get me wrong on that. But like one of the attacks as an example that Trump used is that Biden was against LGBTQ rights for 40 years. Now, like Trump is like a colossal raging piece of shit, right? We all know that. So for him to even suggest that is ridiculous. What he doesn't tell you with that is that Biden was the first person in Congress or the Senate to be for gay marriage. He led that curve, right? Now, is that to say that he doesn't have more evolving to do? Of course not. But what is important to me is that he's capable of doing that evolution, and that is something that is important to him, and it absolutely provably is, right? You go back and look at his record, and it's not perfect, right? Like they bring up the crime bill all the time. The crime bill is problematic. Like I get it, but when it comes to being on the leading edge of trying to evolve on these things, Biden's done really, really well. And again, he's not a lying fascist piece of shit. So this isn't like a hard problem, right? Like we need to get enthusiastic about it. We don't have a choice. Like that's sad, but we don't. Like that's it, right? Work with candidates down ballot. I know Dreen, who's on here, is working on candidates like Kojo in Oklahoma and others, right? So like we've got that work to do. But again, like I'm of the firm opinion that if Trump wins, none of this matters. It really doesn't. Like the amount of damage that he's done to kind of the norms and to the rule of law already. Like if this executive order works, then Congress is dead. Like Congress doesn't matter anymore, right? So,
and it's not going to work. We know that it's not going to work.
I don't think so. I hope not. Also, we lost your video, Seth.
Oh crap! Oh man, you have been doing such a good job stalling.
No, dude. I could talk a lot. He's definitely DSR Metal just said Trump is a fascist. He definitely is. So hold on. So DRS Metal said Biden won't even evolve on marijuana. Yeah, he did. Right? Of course he did. He wants to decriminalize nationally. Right? Is that now? Am I for legalizing it nationally? Of course I am. But like to say that he hasn't evolved on pot, it's just wrong. It's just not true. Right? He's gone from being like understanding it as this thing that should be illegal his entire life to evolving to the point where like obviously we should decriminalize it. Now you got to remember, he's not the presidential candidate for young Democrats. He's the presidential candidate for all Democrats. And I am here to tell you, as someone who talks to the older Democrats, that this is not an easy thing for them to understand. That pot, it shouldn't be illegal. And so he's got to be the person who threads that needle for the entire party, which sadly has like center right people in it. And that's just, until we get big enough to change that, that's just the way it is. But anyway.
So what would you say to the concern that decriminalization is effectively the same thing as allowing big pharma to get their foothold into the cannabis industry?
If you legalize it, that's going to happen anyway. Right?
It's happening now. Yeah, we can see.
So like if you legalize it recreationally, you think they won't?
Yeah. What is it? Former Speaker of the House Boehner.
Yeah.
He's like a massive.
He's a tobacco money. Like that guy's hands have blood all over them, right? He was the guy famously, other than for crying, which he was very good at, for giving out giant checks from lobbyists to people on the floor of Congress for the tobacco industry.
Yep.
Like it's brutal. Yeah. So, I mean, welcome to, capitalism in America where, regulation dictates that only large companies should be allowed to make money. Hey, your camera's back. That's fancy.
Yeah. Okay.
So and
here. That is disgusting, and I try bringing that up,
right?
Because what are we seeing right now? You go to jail for possession and or distribution, even.
Yeah.
You leave jail and you go to apply for one of these dispensary locations, and they tell you, "Oh, well, we're not going to hire you because you're a felon." Doing the thing that you're applying to do, right?
Yeah.
That, in a nutshell, is why Black Lives Matter is happening right now. It's not because of Marxists.
I mean, yeah. So, yeah, Metal. I'm empathetic, but saying Biden is too stubborn is just wrong. That's not what's going on. Like I've been watching Biden for a long time. His evolution on almost everything is just a thing that I've watched happen. Right. So he's not too stubborn. He's just having to speak to constituencies that are not us, and that's annoying. And we know that we're right because we are right. You said that no one should be in jail over a medical plant. I mean, that's just real. I mean, that's obviously true. And it's sad it was ever that way, but we're sort of having to figure out how to play the ball where it is. And again, like on the other side of it, none of it matters, right? Like we're all rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic at this point. Because if Trump's allowed to be president, we're all fucked anyway. And I mean that. I know that sounds hyperbolic. I mean it literally. Like the country will not be the same. Like the whole idea of democratic process goes away. We're just Russia at that point, right? Elections are a farce. So
we don't have the luxury to think otherwise. We don't have the luxury that we had in 2016 to say, well, hey, everything sucks, so we might as well try and burn it down to the ground. I was right there in that boat. And I try to every now and then. I feel myself going back into that same boat. I don't see how you can't. Yeah, it sucks. It sucks. Get over it. We cannot afford to lose this country because we're eating ourselves. So we have been running a little long, and I know that you wanted to go forward into a Chirp podcast. Are you still wanting to do that today? Because I am ready to go. I can do.
We can. Yeah. Why not do 4 podcasts? Bring it on.
And one way that I'll wrap up the dividend report, which if you stay on this stream, we're going to go directly into it. It's not ending or anything. But if I'm going to do this as a podcast or something, I don't know, is I was just hearing you speak about, I have a whole bunch of energy happening right now. Have you had to because I'm so interested in the question of work and fulfillment, especially the idea that bullshit jobs, we are actively harming our mental health by our obsession with workism. You are a non-traditional worker, right? You do this full time. You do podcasting full time.
Yep.
What is your experience with finding fulfillment? Have you had any issues in this space?
That's an interesting question. It's so I've always been pretty non-traditional because I looked at working for other people and realized the math was jacked from the jump. And I had this weird, audacious thought that what would happen if I just did what I wanted? And so I lived in a bus in the Arctic for a long time, had a job, but I was bartending for 4 hours a day and I got to drink the whole time. So it was more partying and they just gave me food money for the next day. Right. So actually it was Yellowknife too. So I made decent money, but my time was more valuable to me as a function of what I was willing to give for money. So it's been an open question in my mind for a long time. And I got down to the States where I couldn't work, right? Initially, when I first got down here, I was an illegal.
Ooh.
Yep. Not anymore, thankfully.
Something tells me you're not the type of illegal immigrant anyone cares about.
They didn't. And that, honestly, I still carry guilt. We lived in Tucson, Arizona for a while. It's my wife had a job there at the VA. And, driving around would be constantly, I'm terrified every time I drove anywhere, right? Because if I get a taillight out, I could get deported and no one cared. I would see, abuelas, grandmothers with their kids pulled over on the side of the road all the fucking time in Tucson, all the time. And they never looked at me because I'm not the right color. And that's gross and really messed up.
Yeah.
Anyway, so speaking of tangents, I was going somewhere and I don't remember now.
You were talking about how
we were talking about work.
Yeah.
So, I got to the point where I couldn't work and I was trying to do some odd jobs or whatever. And finally I was like, I can play music a little bit. I could sort of play bass. Why don't I see, if I could just play bass in a band and make some money that way. And it was a country band. Anyone who knows me knows how ridiculous this is. It was a country band that I worked for first. Corey doesn't play country. Corey also doesn't speak about himself in the third party because that's lame. I just want to throw that ironic apology out there. But yeah, so that started a 13-year music career where all I did was play music for money, right? So, I was perfectly self-sufficient that way, living a very, very simple life. But again, every hour of every day was mine. And I love that. And I want that for everyone. I don't care what you do. That just, that's something that is worth working for, even if it takes, 10 years of sucking a guitar, which is exactly what happened to me to get to that point, or whatever you're doing. Right. It's a good arc. And now, of course, I'm married and my, wife makes good money. So I basically am just constantly in this crisis of meaning. Cause if I make $1,000 a month, it doesn't mean anything.
Right.
It's in the great context of thing, that's not going to make me feel good about myself. That's a rounding error on our income. Not really, but you know what I mean? It's not going to affect our quality of life that much. Although that's what we spend on her student loan every month. So there's that.
Oh man. Well,
Yeah,
okay, that's a really good question. Do you feel driven to get income to increase your quality of life?
no, what I feel driven to do is to basically run moonshots, low probability, high reward uh, projects with the explicit goal of making so much money that Michelle gets all of her time back. Nothing else really matters anything to me at all. Like, because I think she would still be doing, like, she's a neuropharmacologist for the VA. I think she would still be doing something like that because she actually does want to serve that community in this way. But having her wake up every morning with the ability to pull shoot at any moment is something that I'm working, probably 12 hours a day on that. And again, but I get to pick how, right? Like all the things that I'm doing are stuff I'm super passionate about anyway. So like I get kind of the best of both worlds that way. And it's part of what I'm going to embed in all the work that I do is advocating to make sure that everybody gets to do that.
Man, that's awesome. That's awesome. And you exactly right there prove the point. People, they want to find fulfillment. You give them the opportunity to, and they're going to do it in amazing ways. And the craziest thing too, we're going to get to this point, and I'm going to say this before you start ChirpCast because I'm sure you don't want me to say it there. But if you are an early adopter of this technology and it gets big, suddenly you might be on some sort of Business Insider interview, and people are asking you like, well, how does your mind work? How did you get in on this tech? That was the next big thing and everything, and suddenly your ability to make your own decisions will result in the exact thing that I expect will happen. So for my followers, this is how I'm going to leave off this episode of the Dividend Report. I wanted to thank you all so much because people have chipped in to help me out. I have been absent for the past few months, and I've tried to explain that, part of it is the unconditional aspect of UBI is that you don't have to feel beholden to this group or that group. Like you can't say that someone who's in a relationship and they get all of their money every week is completely free. I'm not trying to talk about you and your wife, by the way.
No, I mean, honestly, it's not like I don't. It's not like I don't feel that.
Right.
But at the same time, like I had to get used to it really quickly because she's a fucking badass, and I wanted to be married to her no matter what. So there it is.
Yeah, that kind of love is going to completely make everything else moot. And but unconditional, that's unconditional love. Like
and from her, like that's what allows me to do all of this stuff because it could be very different, right? Mm-hmm. Like I think some people end up using that as sort of elements of control, which would have made our relationship last for 10 minutes, but it just that's never been like she literally is just completely ultrally supportive. Ultrally is not a word, but you get it. And that, I mean, honestly, that's UBI, right? Yes. We're not asking any questions. This is just like your base level is taken care of no matter what. And and this is going to sound weird, but what I hope and dream for people is that you get bored out of your fucking mind. Because getting bored, like the times that I've been the most bored, playing the most video games, wasting the most time, the times after that when I'm like, I'm bored, I want to do something, are the most productive, creative times of my life. And everyone should get to experience that. Should be bored out of your freaking mind. Like I can't play another video game to save my own life because that's when you're going to cure cancer or something. It's when you're going to do something amazing.
That is where I am right now. I haven't been spending the past 4 months playing video games, but after Yang dropped out, I lost all of that extra energy that got me past my perfectionism problem. And then it was just kind of like, well, I don't know what I'm going to talk about. I don't know what I'm going to do. But I was so bored. And I could tell, like I'm going to start devolving. I'm going to start getting some really bad mental issues. I'm going to bite this in the bud because I want to feel fulfilled. I want to have a change in the world and I want to do what I can do. Dude, when you have a society filled with people who all believe the same thing, everything changes. And not only that, though, that's a small part of the people. Most people I speak to, they like working. They love their work. I'm the outlier, so that's a long-winded way to say thank you to my supporters because I'm not good with saying thank you because I am such a perfectionist that I put stuff out there and I refuse to go back. I could use like a community manager or something to like do some more of the, hey, thanks for chipping in these dollars and everything, because it's not completely unconditional. And you guys have changed my life. You've gotten me through some of the hardest times of my life. And during this global pandemic, it almost feels awful that there are people who are getting evicted right now out on the streets, and I'm somehow able to do this. Words cannot begin to express my gratitude for all that. So we're going to move this conversation over into blockchain, and I hope that anyone who is watching continues to watch, because I find this as one and the same. He was saying something earlier about how, within 10 or so years, change is inevitable. I think it's going to happen much more quickly. And we're going to talk about blockchain.
So I'm going to switch the brand over. So huge thank you to Jenner, by the way, from the Mindwave podcast, because this is his platform. He's like, you guys should just use this. It'll be great. That's not how he talks, but boom. Now it's Chirp. What?
Just like that.
What?
Okay.
And like part of me wants to play this, but I'm just going to play a few seconds and then I'm going to stop it just because it's kind of like a little bit long and we don't really need it. But like. Anyway,
fancy. I love that. Fancy. I love that. I feel like I'm on the block. I'm in the blockchain.
You're in it. Yeah. Oh yeah. You're in it. I mean, really, the entire universe is a simulation that's basically based on blockchain technology anyway. So that part is a lie. Welcome to the ChirpCast. We have one of my dear friends, Seth, from the Dividend Report on. The Dividend Report is a YouTube channel that you should go subscribe to right now. Pause this, go subscribe. And then come back focusing on advocacy for UBI and just smarty pants cool stuff. In the political and sort of pragmatic policy space. Is that fair?
Yeah, hopefully so.
Yeah, right.
More philosophical, maybe.
That too, because I think that's an important element to it. So Seth, you're another person who I am voluntelling. You're being voluntold. Oh, nice. Lori's in with her referral. I'm actually I wish I could copy that and actually throw it on YouTube. There's a waiting list for Chirp, and she just posted her referral link for it because she's smart.
So you sent me something, I think, a long time ago, and I just kind of got the link. And I hate to say this, but it's I am kind of more of a layman when it comes to blockchain.
That's okay. And that's I love that. And this is what happened with the Shipple community too, the cryptocurrency that I started. Most of the people that I talked to about it were like, "What's Bitcoin?" I have no idea. And so Shipple became this way to sort of on ramp people into this space. And I think Chirp is going to be the same way. There's so many people dissatisfied with Facebook and Twitter and how kind of social media works. And Chirp is really, as a social media platform, trying to speak to those things in a real way. But it's built with blockchain in mind. It's going to have its own cryptocurrency that is the driving the economics in the space and stuff like that. So it's a great way to ask all of those different questions and answer them. And really, like that link that I sent you is just a waiting list, right? So you click on that and you're like, hey, let me know when you guys are on there, but it gives you a referral link so that you could share that out if you want to. And the more, of your friends that sign on to the waiting list, the higher up the waiting list you go, and the more coins you're going to start with, which will become important pretty soon. So, I mean, Seth, if it's cool with you, I mean, this podcast is about basically a couple things. One, talking about, what kind of channel you want to run on Chirp. Because again, I'm just presuming that you will, because I think you will, but please do. Because I'm like going after the people that I really want there, and you're definitely in that category. So I want everyone else that's going to be on Chirp to know who Seth is and to know your community and feel connected to it. And the other thing is like actually showing you and your community what the platform is going to look like. So we can just do a little.
Is it okay if I throw a lot of the concerns, not necessarily concerns, but like, hey, this is the reason why I did not click on the link that you sent me?
Tell me that for sure.
Everything that I know of you, I respect the hell out of you. I respect the hell out of Rio too. I had no reason to think when you sent me that link, like, oh, he's shilling this coin, but still, that's the way that it kind of felt.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, have you had that kind of pushback where people are like, dude, you're shilling me some, what is it? They call it shit coin, And I don't know anything about Chirp, so I don't want to
call that's perfect. I think that's entirely fair.
And anyone who like knows, all right, I did the work to try and figure out what Bitcoin is, but is still really more of a layman. They view anything other than Bitcoin, or some of them do, as like, well, this is just
Yeah, so that's a Bitcoin maximalist, and they're kind of funny. It is more of a religion at this point than anything, because like what they'll say about Bitcoin is that it's the only true decentralized cryptocurrency, and here's the big problem with that. If you are a Bitcoin miner and you control more than 51% of Bitcoin mining, then you can change the software and make it anything that you want, and no one can stop you. Period.
And it was designed to not have that be possible, but I guess
they didn't think it was possible. And now what they didn't foresee, and again, like, don't get me wrong, like I still like Bitcoin. I think it's fantastic. But people need to understand that it is not decentralized at all.
Right.
3 different outfits own like I think 60+% of the mining, and those 3 outfits are all basically in a consortium that's owned by one company, right? And it's all out of China. So like the idea that Bitcoin is decentralized is just wrong. It's just not, right? It's still an amazing proof of concept. The brand, I think, is as valuable as anything, and that's real. People know Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin crossed $12,000 per today. That's real, right? Like nobody can take that away from it at all. It has that value because we all collectively say that it does. So it's interesting, but I think like the shitcoin thing and the shilling it, I think that's an important conversation, because in 2015, 2016. We see thousands of projects, right? And, you could throw a dart at that market in 2017 and make money, like literally just randomly. And so people would shill stuff, and there was tons of vaporware, like people saying, I'm going to we're going to revolutionize everything and just give us all your money. And then people did. And then they suddenly had $100 million market cap and no product. And, it was the .com bubble of blockchain. It really was, right? Like they were just, everybody knew that it was going to be something. And so everybody basically just said, I have an amazing idea, and people threw money at it. And so it looked real, right? It's exactly what happened in the .com bubble.
And then 8 years later, it actually came to fruition.
Right. At the end of the .com burst, Amazon was worth $1.93.
Right.
Go check Amazon's price now, right? So we know in the blockchain space, we know it's real. We know what it can do. We know what it kind of has to do to kind of bring our civilization into the next level. And there were a lot of companies that failed, which is also going to happen. And that'll happen this time now too, right? That's definitely part of it. And so, when the Corey in your life comes in, is all freaking crazy excited about it, and it's like, hey, we're going to launch this completely, totally new social media platform. And like, we're, going to finally give people an alternative to Facebook and Twitter. Some cautious, like some doubt is very fair, right?
Especially considering I invested in Bitcoin in 2017. What was it, December? Not that much. And I actually
still, if you watch an investment, it's $100 or 10,000. If you watch it drop in value by 70%.
Oh yeah, I think I put 100 in. I lost 50. And I actually just sold it, and I made a $20 profit this month. So
yeah, well, and that's great. See, like my first experience in cryptocurrencies, like I came from a forex trading background, right? Late 2016, I got into this. I think it was like blockchain for supply chain, something or other, the Yuan chain, some stupid thing, and 7x'd my money in the space of 48 hours. Right, like 700%. I was like, "What?" Like, I was like grinding out 2 to 3% a day in forex, and that is amazing. Just if you know any traders, when you can do that, that's really, really good. And so the whole idea that you can come in and do that, I'm like, this doesn't make any freaking sense at all. Like, it kind of blew my mind. And so I spent a year and a half trading and did pretty well. But you could see the irrational highs that it was creating if you're in the trading space. But so many people they don't know. They're not going to look at a chart. They don't know how to read it anyway. Like, it's just, it's problematic at the very, very least, right?
Do you mind if I try and give a layman's explanation of what blockchain is to my followers who are still watching, and you critique me on what I understand it to be?
Yes. Anytime you want to stop and go back to talk about any concept, I think that's only value add for us, period.
because it's super hard for me to link this to why I think it's so important in the universal basic income space, but it's there, and once you kind of make that connection, you can never separate it. 2008, the financial crisis occurs. You get the white paper or the blockchain from Satoshi Nakamoto.
For Bitcoin itself, not blockchain, but yeah.
Bitcoin itself, but that was the origin of what we understand to be blockchain. No.
Biggest use case. I think it was elsewhere, but it doesn't really matter. That was like that's where, I mean, the by far, I think the biggest thing that pushed blockchain into everyone's kind of consciousness.
Gotcha. Okay. And that was in direct response to the ineptitude of our financial system that allowed the collapse to happen in the first place. And that ineptitude centrally boils down to the question of decentralization. And that's what banks are. Someone's going to come and steal your currency. You don't have the time and the effort to keep it locked up and keep track of it. So, hey, you go over to this centralized banking institution that will keep your money for you. And in that sense, they hold the keys to the lock. That has its purposes. What if you never had to do that in the first place? What if the banks never had to acquire that kind of ungodly power, which it is power, and you could own your currency protected and it actually not really even be there because the entire value of currency is that it's scarce. Up to this point, there's never been a way to make scarcity a thing that didn't involve something tangible that you could touch.
Or a government, right? Yeah.
Or a government, right? The algorithm that cryptocurrency and the blockchain essentially works on uses such mathematics to 100% solve what they call, double spending problem.
Yep.
Every single time that these really intense mathematical algorithms are run, they're taken from every single computer in the world, that they all agree at the same time. This was done. Nothing else happened here. We all agree. That's the centralization problem that you're talking about with Bitcoin, that if you have 61% of the computers running that math, you can say, yeah, this is actually what happened.
You could change how the whole system runs. It actually would only take 51%.
It would only take 51%.
Yeah. But you're totally right. A couple things I would add.
Okay.
The banks, like when you think about the dollar, right? Used to be backed by gold. Now it's backed by what the phrase is the full faith in government, full faith and credit of the U.S. government, which doesn't mean anything, right? Like it does that when you boil that down, those are just words, right?
Right.
But it still works, which is, I think, a critical point, right? Like we have this shared mythology that a dollar is worth a dollar, and it works, right? And so where the banks come in and where this gets really kind of criminal is when you go and put an application for a house mortgage and it gets approved. That bank doesn't use their money to fund that. They go to something called the Federal Reserve that's going to invent that money out of whole cloth, not from a box of, a scarce resource. They just increase the number of dollars that exist and they lend it to the bank for 0.25% a year. And then that bank gets to charge you more for a mortgage for money that they just got for nothing, basically, right?
Right. This is fractional.
Is it? Yeah. And that's the whole other thing. The fractional reserve trading. So this is where it gets really gross. That house now counts as an asset for them on their books, right? Because it's not done until you're finished paying it off. So that debt is an asset for them. And they get to take the gestalt, the total of their assets as a bank, and times that between 3 and 100, and that's how much they can trade on the open stock market. So it's fractional reserve trading. It's insane. It's why in 2008 and 2009, when these mortgage-backed securities that all got lumped together, that everybody knew was going to fail, right? Any crazy person would know that it was going to fail. When it did fail, suddenly all the banks were insolvent. Because they didn't have 1-to-1 money invested. They had sometimes 100-to-1 money invested. Right. So if that drops by 10%, that's like way more than all of the money that they have. Right. Yeah. So like the deck of cards that they managed to create is ridiculous. So and that goes down to the actual value of the dollar itself. Right.
And even then they benefit because they just turn around the American person who loses their house is out on the street, and they buy everything up for cheap. So they never lose. They never lose.
Right. It's and not only that, while that was happening, they also got bailed out to the tune of $1 trillion. $1 trillion that was invented out of whole cloth by the Federal Reserve, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when Satoshi Nakamoto, person or persons or alien from the future, decides to come in and create Bitcoin, Bitcoin is not run by a government. This is like, I assumed when I first heard about Bitcoin, amazing idea, they're fucked. There's no way this will work. But this is like, decentralized or not, it's decentralized enough that the US government cannot shut it down. And that's amazing and crazy to think about, right? Because there's a direct competitor now to the preeminence and dominance of the dollar and their total control over economics, right? Because now we can put and store value in this consensus algorithm on the internet, which is nuts, but it's real and it's happening. So the Federal Reserve can have as many dollars out there as it wants, right? Which is why, and they've been increasing the supply, the number of dollars that exist. They've been increasing that over time for a long time, right? It's kind of just how they handle over budgeting and different things like that. But like 100 years ago, you could buy a house with $20 or whatever the hell it was, right? And very quickly over long periods of time, that sense didn't make much sense, but like you can see the dollar now is buys a lot less now than it did then, right? So it's deflating in value. Right. Whereas Bitcoin is increasing in value because there will only ever be 21 million of them. And while there's new Bitcoin coming out all the time with the mining, the amount that comes out every 10 minutes gets halved every 4 years, which creates that supply glut, which is why, if you look at the whole chart of 12 years of Bitcoin, it runs pretty much like a clock. Every 4 years, you see a really, really fun spike.
Okay, so I have been wanting to have this conversation because it runs at odds with my understanding of how, like, some of the defenses that I've given Yang's proposal and how to fund universal basic income works with the notion that inflation has a utility in the growth of our economy. That, we ultimately lose on this side of the bargain, but it serves a purpose in that it is a perpetual growth engine for the economy. That could be a good thing or a bad thing. And ultimately, you could use the universal basic income purely with deficit spending, some believe, to act as
totally believe that.
Quantitative easing for the people instead of the banks.
That's a perfect way to put it with the quantitative easing. So for anyone that doesn't know what that is, quantitative easing is basically the government buying stocks, right? That's what it boils down to. Like, the stock market is crashing. We need buyers to keep the price at certain levels. So the government comes in, again, invents money, like type, on the money machine, and buy stocks, and that stabilizes the price. That's quantitative easing. Obama did that in the crash as an emergency, but they have been low-key doing it the whole time over the last 10 years, which is not good. I mean, it's how Trump has been keeping the economy, looking like it's still good by, like, literally just buying stuff in the stock market, but with government money. And it's not even taxpayer money. This is what people think, like, why are you doing that with my taxpayer money? It's not that. They're literally just, increasing the supply of dollars. And so the biggest problem with inflation is when you see runaway inflation, like in Zimbabwe recently, or Germany before World War II, where people are driving around with trucks full of trillions of dollars or kroners or whatever, and it's not worth anything, right? So that's the worry, and it's a genuine concern. But what we've been noticing is that they keep printing all this money, and it's not really having an effect. Right now, granted, it's kind of secured just so that rich people experience it, which might be an issue. But where they have used deficit spending for supporting people the way that UBI would, it has an inflationary effect, but it's not that big. And the benefits kind of outweigh it by almost 10 to 1. Right?
So I've heard a myriad of reasons as to why we are not seeing the inflation, and we're about to get into modern monetary theory, which may derail us further than you're wanting to go. So stop. Go on. I think that's interesting, and I think when you get into MMT, like, they're saying, no, you can just print like $18 trillion. Well, fucking no, right? There's a limit, and we should find out where that limit is through testing it. But we definitely are not close to that limit now. and like I've listened to a lot of Alex Howlett talking. He's come up with his own thing. He's like, we need to talk about CMT, consumer monetary theory. It's like the twist here. The biggest problem that I have with modern monetary theorists is that they have to tie it to employment. They use employment as a buffer stock to decide how much currency is in the system at any given time. You can take and put in money based upon employment status. I'm like, well, under universal basic income, just say that we have full employment. Like everyone's employed because everyone has value. They try and keep like this definition in some strict scenario. But other than that, I mean, it certainly seems like they should be validated at the moment, considering how much money has been printed in the past year. It is unbelievable. And like, where is the inflation? Some people are saying, oh, well, wait 18 months and then you'll see. But I really don't know. And if we do see it, like you said, there's not really that big of a reason to say, well, like it's going to be runaway inflation. My personal take on it is that this is just showing how we have in fact reached a truly abundant society, and the fact that you're never going to run out of supply, except for these crucial aspects of the economy: housing, healthcare, and education. For the rest of it, there's unlimited demand, and now we're getting into the realm of digital demand with ones and zeros, and then and that's where blockchain is super interesting to me, because value is unlimited within this space. It can be created out of thin air, and it will, and beautiful things are going to happen. But
I have so much to tell you on that. You're so right. Go on.
The problem that I keep on running into is that what I understand of Satoshi Nakamoto's paper is that it's trying to get around that problem of quantitative easing. And if you go back to a system in which you have a perfectly scarce value that you're tacking on the currency to, it's effectively like gold, right? So you're not able to use quantitative easing in order to adjust monetary policy.
Yeah, Bitcoin the price of Bitcoin can only go up or down depending on the actual market at that time. What is Seth willing to pay for a Bitcoin? What is Corey willing to sell a Bitcoin for? That's it, right? And of course, it could be dropped up 100 million times. So it's not like people aren't buying like a $12,000 Bitcoin, right? You can buy $100, you can buy $1. That doesn't matter. So yeah, I think that's the critical thing. People are seeing, and if you talk to Bitcoin maximalists, or even like people that are really into cryptocurrency as this sort of decentralized store of value, the worry is that if we keep experimenting with this kind of quantitative easing and with just like the rampant printing of money, going from $10 trillion in debt to like 25 or whatever in the space of a decade, and like what that means, right? Adding more debt in the last 4 years than we've added in the last 200, percentage wise, like it's weird, right? Like, what's going to happen? Like, what's going to be the downside effect? And one of the effects eventually is just the complete collapse of the dollar. And that's their worry. And it's not, I'm not seeing that around the corner because there's so much momentum in the ordinary system that it kind of keeps running on its own story. But it's not impossible, right? We don't really know what would trip it over necessarily. And if it does, then the game's over, right? So Bitcoin's like a backup.
Yeah, the thing I imagine happening before that is we lose the world reserve status, that some other currency comes in, and then at that point you can't rely on the truths that you've had of printing currency, because now you're under the influence of the next world reserve currency, be that the yuan, Chinese.
Yeah, I would say one, but I could be wrong.
And that brings us back to the question of trust. It's just like, how much trust is there in a currency? And I don't see the reason why the trust would falter in the United States until our entire society collapses, be that in the next 4 years if Trump gets reelected. So in that sense, I'm very interested in mana because it's like it doesn't run off of the same expectations that Bitcoin does. It runs off of the idea that you're kind of, it's almost like Tether, except you're giving it out as a basic income dividend to every person who uses that platform. Do you know much about mana? Because I wanted to pick your brain.
I don't really know anything about mana.
So I would like, because I need to go and really learn about it. Scott Santens is on the board
Nice.
He's pretty involved with the development of this. It is a cryptocurrency universal basic income.
Okay.
And I've heard some people say that this notion is absolutely impossible because that's just not how cryptocurrency works. Like, you'll never be able to establish its value if it's constantly being inflated and given out to everyone.
So that might be true. But I think what I'd like to see in that case is like a minimum viable product, right? What's the minimum viable version of this that works? And I think you could do that on a small scale, right? Like, you could create like a sort of an enclosed system community, stores, houses, yada, 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 right? Where that was the only currency that you accepted within that realm, right? And there'd have to be some kind of functional exchange so that people in that in that community could get whatever they needed from outside of it, right? So you'd have to see that where that conversion is. And Scott Seths is a smart guy, so like the likelihood that they've kind of thought this through, I would kind of give credence sight unseen to the possibility of it. But they definitely have huge challenges, right? Because I mean, you could see, for anyone who is kind of not versed in the story and the mythology of why this should have value, why would they take it, right? Mm-hmm. But if it's on an exchange and they have sorted out how to make sure that it is trading at a consistent rate for anyone that wants to buy or sell it in an open market, then it will work.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the next part of it. Back to the layman description. What is money? Money is something that we have value in. Some people will say, "Oh, well, no, money has to have intrinsic value behind it." Gold is.
They're all wrong. Every one of them saying money has to have intrinsic value doesn't understand what money is today.
Right. Well, you would think that the intrinsic value is. I don't know. They would like to say,
it's the myth.
Completely scarce. Yeah, it is a myth. But
it's the story. We have to believe. Each human being has to believe in the story that it has the value, and the why, I personally believe, doesn't matter at all. Right?
You can actually say, though, that for the first time, you do have intrinsic value. Well, one, it runs off of electricity. There's actual work being done behind it.
Yeah.
Whether it matters or not, that's one thing. But two,
you can say it's a good story, right? And it's a good story that our monkey minds that believe in scarcity, which is totally true, we buy into that, right? Mm-hmm. There's only 21 million. Like, if you really if a kid is spending Bitcoin, do they give a shit? No, right? Mm-hmm. But like, to where the people are, there hits that limit where people outside the system have to be sort of convinced that it has value. And if you go and buy one for 12,000 and sell it for 11,000, you feel that loss. That's real, right? And like, the electricity and the power behind it, that has, as far as intrinsic value, I do agree with that, because it costs a certain amount to make a Bitcoin, like, ever, right? To mine one. That's a sort of a fact in the real world, which I think is interesting. But you're also going to be able to do that function of mining could be built on top of the attention economy, right? There will be a certain amount of human attention, human production, say on a social media platform, that can be the function in that value that will operate, I think, in every bit as effectively as requiring computational power and electricity does for Bitcoin.
This is where I'm going to hit the bookmark, because I'm afraid we might get stuck in the quagmire here, because this is the question that I've been meaning to ask, and I don't want to ask it, but
those are the ones you have to ask.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. But before I get there, there's another function side to mana that's extremely important, is that they have the idea it's like a portfolio based system. It's like, all right, let's say that you don't need your monthly dividend, or you don't need all of it. And let's say that you have the idea that charity is really all you need to solve poverty. You don't, you need a lot more. But let's say that's the case. What if mana existed also as an app? You log in, there's the Mana app, and it shows you metadata, anonymized profiles of every single person in the world or in your country, and say, hey, you don't need your dividend. Why don't you send it over to this demographic? Here's Flint, Michigan. Here's the poverty rate. Here is a household in Flint, Michigan, which you can't see the specifics of, but you can see that they report this amount of poverty per year, or that maybe there's a high chance that a female lives here or something. Would you like to send your monthly dividend outwards to these people? You can essentially bake charity into this system. And this is what I tell to a lot of detractors of universal basic income, or say, well, like, how much waste is there from these billionaires getting and millionaires getting $1,000 check that they don't need each month?
They get taxed way more than $1,000. Zero is the answer to that question.
100%, but they also love charity, and charity spending is at all-time highs right now. Yeah, they're going to be taxed more, but something tells me that they're going to see that 1,000 and think, oh, you know what? I'm gonna get my my religious kicks off right now by giving. That's what they love to do. I think that is a huge thing. And if Mana doesn't do it, I think that if Yang were to get in office, make the platform, you have a national app like a COVID tracker that says, hey, this is the application of the blockchain dividend that you're getting and sending out. That is the revolutionary idea in my mind. And maybe you should have Scott Santens on, since you have
I would absolutely. Yeah, no, I've been meaning to talk to him for a while, because I would love to talk to him about that. I would love to get him on Chirp, because again, they're talking about the data dividend, right?
Yeah.
And this advocacy, I've been repeating this over and over, and I will continue to. The advocacy is really important to make it so that government mandates that these large companies not only protect your data, but that you own it. Like, that data ownership is critical, and that you be sort of compensated for that, right? Mm-hmm. We have no idea how long that will take, or if it will ever happen. What we do know is that Chirp is going to give 50% of all the revenue that it pulls in from advertising and everything else back to the community from the jump, by design.
As like a dividend? Or...
Well, so we're looking into different ways to make sure that it gets back out to the community. And we're not 100% sure about how that's going to happen. We want to, because it might end up sort of being, have to make sure that there's a dividend, and then half going to the high performers, something like that. We don't really know. Like, we're open to ideas on that. We just want to make sure that it goes back to the community. So yeah, I mean, I personally like the idea of a dividend, though, as far as because that just keeps the motor running in exactly the analogous way to the economy as a whole.
And not only that, though, because here's the tricky quagmire question that I had for you is I with the more and more that I think about how great these platforms can be, from what I understand of Chirp and the ways in which every kind of action that is done is valuable as long as people interact with it in some way, and you can make money just by engaging in a meaningful way. And I've heard the conversations about how meaningful engagement, if it's compensated, you'll get more of it, and it's going to be a kind of positive reverberance in the platform. I also think, though, that can go the opposite way. And here's what I'm concerned about. I see the ways in which workism is driven by the incentive structure that our society has. And what I'm really concerned about is that one of these platforms, if they take off in a huge way, you're going to see not something based off of free will, but based off of some internal servitude to the engagement driven economy that is now created, right? I didn't want to make videos for the last 4 months because I just didn't have it within me, but I don't have a UBI, so I'm still going to be driven, and there are some negative, what if you had to continue the Moving Forward podcast after it's driven, all of your energy's gone, now you're in the same position as we have right now.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
No, that's an interesting ongoing open question, right? So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to basically just kind of give you the demo, because I think it's the best way to sort of get into this, because you're right. About right now, when we get likes, we get dopamine shots, right?
Right.
Now you're going to not get dopamine shots. You're going to get coins.
It's going to be double the effect.
It could be, right? And no one's really successfully done this before. There's other startups that are doing it kind of this year. They're starting versions of it, but we don't know. And that, I think that's something that it's worth, having smarty pants philosophers around here to contemplate, because as we do this, my job is, I self-titled myself Minister of Culture, is to whatever extent possible, and it might be a lot, it might be a tiny amount, I don't know. I want to have the people on this platform that are thinking about this thing in exactly the way you're describing it, asking these questions. I know that Kurt and the dev team are very open to building into it the things that we want to that we want to do, and some of it might even be trying and failing at it. Like, we're open to doing that, right? Not everything that we're going to come up with is going to work or be perfect at all, right? But I'm really hoping that we can drive into the initial culture of this thing, the way that we feel about it, the way that we talk about it, the way that we speak to each other about it, that we can make it a positive thing from the jump. And again, like, that might last 6 months, that might last a year. Like, I don't know how much that reverberates 20 years from now.
See if you can bake into your mission statement, don't be evil, right? But
yeah, really but have it not be from the top down, but from the bottom up.
Here's a thought experiment. I heard you and James talk about Ready Player One, which is huge. I had a podcast about building the Oasis before I did the Dividend report, because we
still have to talk about NFTs.
Yeah, I am so into this idea. I tend to focus so much more on the really cool parts of Ready Player One than the entire fact that it was a dystopia. Like, you had existing alongside, you have these scarce items, and robotics and automation have taken care of everyone, and yet we still kind of have poverty. We still have these mega trailer parks of vertical trailers, and now you're in this weird twisted economy of people living in scarcity when abundance is truly there. So I think, have the energy, focus on the idea that we can get there and we can have something very, very cool. But how do we also add in a poverty roadblock, or something to fix that ultimate issue
ultimately, I think, in the seeing the countries that do the most redistribution but still allow wealth creation, those are the countries that have gotten it the most right statistically, right?
Yeah.
And trying to make the United States into Canada, single payer healthcare, all that stuff, that's like basically impossible. There's too much, kind of infrastructural momentum in healthcare in that industry, as a whole, to kind of just do that. But what does do that is fucking UBI.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Like, it turns the whole country into everyone's backyard. One of the first things where, and again, to his credit, Rio kind of was like, oh, okay. He had grown up with the Republican conservative idea that you could just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and vote with your feet. Or like, you've never met a poor person, because they can't, right? It's obvious to anyone who's ever lived on, small means that you can't just do that. That's not a thing. But if everyone's getting $1,000 a month, you could go and get a cabin in Tennessee and live like a king, for crying out loud, right? Like, that'd be an option too. So I think that's where, like, advocating for UBI as a thing that we do nationally is not going to be like, that's something that we have to keep doing. So I think it's critical. But if we can bypass it and at least allow for, at least in the context of social media, the amount of value that we're producing there, that you have a reasonable presumption that 50% of that value that you create there is coming back to you, is sort of at least initially what we're after, because it's definitely not happening right now.
I like it. I think that's the right idea. And I say this all the time. I say universal basic income on its face isn't going to stop the rat race. It's not going to fix our mental health issues.
No.
People are still going to look at celebrities and have this unrealistic expectation of reality. They're still going to be influenced by the advertisements that they're shown every day. I'm just most focused on there at least being the alternative and the space for which people can point that out. So that was really the stickiest question that I've got. I'm ready to go from here on out.
So one thing I'll point out, anybody who's used to cryptocurrency, I did not have to use a cryptocurrency wallet to use my private key to log into this platform. I just use my Gmail account. And again, for most people on the internet, that's how you log on to stuff these days. So we wanted to make it really, really easy. So right off the bat, underneath my name, you can see that I have like gazillion coins. This is the test environment that the devs are doing. So in all likelihood, I'm going to start with a lot less coins than that. Everybody who comes on the system is going to start with at least 1,000 coins initially, right? Like, you want to make sure you get in right away, because we want to start everyone with enough so that they can kind of use all this stuff and not really notice that they are spending coins on posting in different things, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And if you're on the waiting list and you use your referral link, you're going to start out with more coins.
Should I use your referral link that you
No,
made?
you should use A. I mean, if you are not on the waiting list yet, yeah, by all means use mine or Lori's posted in the comments. You can use hers. But then make sure that you copy your referral link and append it to this show, because that way you can start with a bunch more coins.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So really simply, let's just do a little post there. Boink, boink. So posting costs 4 coins.
And you start with 1,000.
You start with 1,000. So it's like 250 posts, right? Give or take, if that's all you spend it on it. Okay, so here's where it gets fun. Say I come down and I like your post, but I don't just like it once. I like it 4 times. Every like is a coin. So for every like that you get from your community for producing good content is actually coins coming back directly to you. So it costs 4 coins to post. If you get 4 likes or more, you're actually making coins. You're earning them. So there's that. Where you can use these initially is in the system itself. So say like we really, really like this post, and I want to pin it. And this is basically the advertising model for the whole site. When you pin it, it could cost, and you could, this is a sliding thing, cost, you could do it for however many days you want. For 1 day, cost 50 coins. And it goes up to the top right of the whole site. Right. So a lot of the action is going to be in channels, and I'll show you those in a minute. But no matter what, if somebody pins a post, everybody on the whole platform is going to see it.
In the entire platform?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so that's how we're sort of, that attention economy initially, right? Because, it's going to be a while before you can actually withdraw coins and like take them, to some exchange or wherever, whatever you want to do with them. So initially that value just redounds to you're earning the capacity to garner more attention, as we go, right? So it'll sort of be a circular attention economy, at least in the near term.
To become essentially kind of a whale, perhaps?
So... And this is kind of an open question now, right? Because when we launch, I think Kurt wants to get it so that you can only post in a channel, kind of like Telegram, right? So if you wanted like to post on your own personal profile, you'd actually just like buy a Seth channel and do that. But can you imagine, like I was asking this today, like somebody's going to pick SpaceX as a channel and buy it, and people are going to like that channel's going to be busy, and so just as a test or what have you. So it's going to cost 100 coins to buy a channel. You have to buy them right off the bat. I'll tell you right now, anybody who wants a channel is going to want to get in here really, really quickly, because that price is going to go over 1,000 quickly, like at least a 500 very fast. And again, everyone's getting 1,000. So like, whatever, I'll buy 5 channels, right? Which is how we wanted it. And for the early adopters, we wanted this to be very seamless, very easy, and that kind of thing. So I'm going to make a channel right now called Seth Rules, because he does. And so that's going to cost me 100 coins. But this is where this gets really fun. Let's say you come into this channel and you're like, "Hi, Corey, I do rule." And you post it. It's going to cost you 4 coins to post, but 2 of them are going to come to me because I own this channel. So for every post that happens in this channel, 2 goes back to the Chirp Bank, and 2 goes to the channel owner, right? So, instead of having and there's going to be a few things that we add onto these channels right off the bat, but that's like the initial sort of core idea that we're playing with.
So the Chirp Bank is centralized
right now. Yes, what Kurt likes to say is that we're practicing incremental decentralization. So we're working out the tokenomics. So that they can be as transparent as humanly possible. Again, because that story behind scarcity is going to be so important for sort of imbuing coins with that, quote unquote intrinsic value. But yeah, so it's the token is basically virtualized because it's just on this platform, right?
Right.
We're actually in kind of high level talks with a bunch of different blockchains as to where to mint our token and ultimately connect our platform. And so I think for the first 6 months, it's probably going to stay on the platform itself, right? So you won't be able to withdraw your token to like a separate wallet or what have you, right? Because it won't actually be there yet. But this is one of the things Kurt has suggested doing is having the community itself vote for which blockchain we should go onto, which I kind of like. I also kind of think it's crazy because there's like really technical things that even like I don't know about at all that would sort of make me kind of want Kurt to make that goal for our whole, evolution. But he's just got that democratic streak in him because there's a lot of projects out there now that are starting to play with, the decentralized autonomous organization model. And anyway, so that's kind of where he's going on that.
Do you know much about decentralized DAG? I'm forgetting. Bear with me just a moment.
Is it decentralized autonomous governance?
Yes,
it should be. That'd be great.
It's what IOTA runs on.
Okay.
It's direct cyclic graph. It's
I don't know what that is.
Oh yeah, some people are saying this is like a blockchain 2.0. It runs off of a different hashing mechanism. Cool. But yeah, never mind. I'm not going to derail us there.
No, that's right.
Because I've spent some time looking at IOTA.
Me too.
Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. So where like Bitcoin, we think of that as proof of work, right?
Yeah.
The most of the blockchains that we're looking at are all based on EOS or EOS.io. So there's Wax Chain where all the NFTs are cropping up now. There's a Proton where we've got some friends that are building a really awesome exchange and wallet. So there's like a few different options that we have, and we're not really sure which one to go with. But that's actually a combination of proof of stake, where you basically buy some of the token that the blockchain is based on, whether it's EOS or Ethereum or what have you, and you stake it. You basically lock it up, and that gives you shares of resources that kind of accrue over time or whatever, right? So yeah, we'll kind of have to see where we go. But that's what decentralizes our token. Like our token would be built on top of one of these blockchains, and so they're the ones that kind of decentralize it so that it can't be stopped or misconstrued or double spent or whatever like that. That blockchain handles all that stuff, and we just kind of get to build on top of it.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So this is the leaderboard, and of course, this is just a test environment. So these are just like stuff that probably is made up. But like for the amount of coins that you earn, two things that I'm advocating we add very quickly is a leaderboard for channels. So channels that are the most active, most successful, most popular, right? But I also want to do a giving leaderboard. Like I want to know who are the whales that are kind of expending the most gratitude, right? Who's tipping the most? Who's supporting the most channels as much as they can? That kind of thing. Because again, as the minister of culture, I want to really incentivize and celebrate the people that are doing that, because that's really what is going to be required to make sure that the system actually turns over and runs. Is people being generous and supporting each other.
Would you equate yourself with a moderator?
No. We've had those talks about how to handle that question, which is not an easy question when it comes to social media. There a lot of blockchain purists would say you should just never have any moderation whatsoever. It's the internet, let it be whatever it is. And I wondered if Kurt would sort of fall down, because he's been a hacker for his whole life, right? Like he's been knee deep in the dev side of things for, forever. And, when I brought this up to him, I said, I don't know how to answer these questions necessarily, but these are questions I want answers for, right? Because if we're just going to be like Library, which is a platform that I love, they are for sure purists in that regard. I then have to ask myself the question of, like, eventually, if we become that thing that celebrates that you could post whatever the hell you want and we're never going to moderate it at all, it's only a matter of time before the Nazis show up, right? And do I want to expend my energy developing a platform that will, tacitly be supporting and platforming them. And he says, yeah, no, we're not going to have any racism on this site at all. I'm like, oh, okay. So, again, do I know how we're going to manage that? No. Right. And is that going to be, an issue that we look at a lot? I think so. I have a suspicion that we might end up rocking the Reddit kind of thing. Like I really want to make sure that channel owners have, authority within their own channels to moderate as they see fit, which is sort of one layer, right? But then, when if a Nazi channel shows up, then, we as a community, I think, should have the ability to basically vote them off the island, right? Or something to that generalized effect. Like, I'd love to see people power being injected into that. I want everyone thinking about this, though, because this is not something that we have necessarily hammered out firm rules for how to deal with yet, but it is an open question, and we want to make sure that we solve it to the best service of our whole community. How
concerned are you that if not Chirp, a competitor, or not a competitor, because I don't think that's the correct way of looking at it. I think there's going to be Chirp, there's going to be like Twitter and Facebook, there's going to be different outlets. But this does open up the door to a truly decentralized network that has no censorship whatsoever, and within that network, the same incentive structure, the same monetary structure.
It could happen. And I guess what I would say about that, by the way, this is just a profile where you can send tips and stuff. I have a sneaky suspicion that the top line of this might look like Venmo at some point, where you can send whatever you want. But that's derailing your very, very good question a little bit. So let's game that out, right? So you're incentivized as a fascist white supremacist, for example, to make a version of Twitter that starts kicking off liberals because they're so mean, right? It's called Parler or Parlay, and it exists already, right? They will be an echo chamber for hate and division and nastiness, and we won't see it, and that's great, in my opinion, right? I think that's a race to the bottom business model, because I still kind of believe in people.
Right.
And so I have hope that will be a population that is being served, that is constantly shrinking and being isolated from the rest of society, as it should be, right? Like, for example, if you do a KKK rally in Canada, a much bigger rally shows up and beats the shit out of you. And, I am a pacifist for the most part, but KKK rallies in Canada are fucking rare.
Right.
And so, that's, I get, like, and I don't want to paint too rosy of a picture. I don't think it's going to be that simple or that easy, but that's the best answer that we have right now for how we personally are going to deal with it. And hope, if somebody comes up with a better one, we'll tack it on. So I think it comes down to, because I do believe in gamification. I think that's going to be a massive part of social media. I think Chirp is going to evolve in many, many ways, because it can do so much more than your noticeable, what we recognize as social media today. But that's how we go from one thing to another. I can see it. Like, just as you're talking. This is where, like, I want you to finish your thought, but we have to go from here to talking about what Kurt is doing with Nifty Wizards, which is programmable, intelligent NFTs, like the key in Ready Player One, right? That gives you special access, right? Like that layer, and it's all like purpose design. He's doing it in Telegram right now, but I mean, I know for a fact that he's constantly thinking, okay, how do I build this into Chirp, right? And basically, what Nifty Wizards is, we did a whole episode about it a few episodes back, so you can go on library.tv, search Chirp, and find Nifty Wizards. I think it's like episode 6 or something. So basically, like, you get these non-fungible tokens, which are like things that you can own, like digital artifacts that are one-offs on the blockchain, right? And owning it gives you special powers and special rules inside these Telegram channels, which is kind of an allegory, like a first beta step to giving you ownership tickets, for example. So say like, you have to own a Dividend report NFT to get access to the Dividend report Chirp channel, right? Which is kind of as like a bit of a Patreon level to the whole thing. Or you need one to moderate, or you need one to have temporary special powers that kind of exalt you as one of the best fans of the show or whatever. Right? Like they're like anywhere that we could think of taking this is where it's going to go.
Gotcha.
So that's going to get put into it. But because it's an open standard, and my interview right before this was with the co-founder of AtomicHub.io, which is building the standard that these NFTs are running off of on the Wax chain. 21-year-old kid, Seth. It's fucking stupid. Like the guy's so like ridiculously smart, but he came up basically building or operating or being a part of trading circles for Counter-Strike stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And that was just stuff that could make your gun look different, right?
Yeah.
Whereas, the next evolution is obviously that Ready Player One, where like you could get a better car, or you could do like you could grind and get things that act in a very real way in the system.
Yeah.
Which, having that connected to social media is going to be really fun. And so this is why I had to like ultimately bring it back to music. It's like in my, journey or whatever of in some instances handpicking, in some instances, being introduced to the people that are going to run the first 100 channels, like the first 100 real communities. And there's going to be a lot more, but that I know of anyway on the thing. Somebody said, okay, you got to talk to this Mike guy who's part of the upliftart.io project, which is actually a non-for-profit that is bringing in artists and supporting them in releasing their art as non-fungible tokens. It's like limited edition things, right? So an artist comes in, makes a painting, and maybe sells say 5 copies on online, and it'll only ever be 5 copies, right? One of those things was like a GIF, I think, of this amazing, bull art, sold for $45,000, right? They just sold a trading pack of it's like blockchain heroes or whatever, which are like basically just trading cards, right? Mm-hmm. They did $250,000 of business in like an hour and a half, right? And these things are owned forever, right? So this is a collector's market that goes all the way through this. So I'm talking to this guy, and he sees my email. This is so like Kismet is weird. I've been using my Core EC Music email thing because Kurt said, no, you should just keep it. Because I was going to like make a fancy new one. He's like, no, I kind of dig it. Just use that. He said, he asked me if I'm a musician. I said, that was my previous job. I don't really do gigs anymore. And he said, well, I'm a musician, and we're actually doing a release in a couple of weeks of like this whole collective thing where I'm releasing a single in 2 different versions, right? And I got a bunch of artists to come together to create this whole line of visual card NFTs and a video that's going to go. We're releasing it all together as this big new art project. And A, he's not a horrible musician at all. And B, the scarcity, is going to be really interesting. He's selling 999 of one version, but only 18 of the other, right? And on the back end of that, there's all these artists that are donating their art to create like a visual collectible part of this whole kind of experience or whatever, right? And all the artists are going to get paid, and the musician is going to get paid because it's all on the blockchain, and it's all it's all basically trackable, right? It's all programmable, basically, right? Mm-hmm. And so like half an hour later, he's listening to my stuff, and we're going to collaborate on something. And like I've been wanting to like brainstorm, releasing a piece of music as an NFT. So one of my singles for my record from like 10 freaking years ago is going to be probably the second thing that they released this way. And like now, like I literally bought a recording studio hookup for this computer because I now want to make more music. Like I'm suddenly back in the game because I could totally see how this is going to revolutionize everything. And I can't promise this, but I suspect it a lot. There will eventually be NFT integration into Chirp so that your own stuff, whether it's music or art or whatever, will be usable, displayable, tradable, sellable, buyable, whatever, within the Chirp environment before too long. And that's going to change the world. Like that's like until everything goes virtual and we're actually in the Ready Player One universe, that's going to be, I think, where everything goes next.
I love it. I love it. And in that sense, my concern has shifted more towards like, if I'm primarily focused on gamification, which I am, because this simulated worlds we're going to be diving more and more into, because there's unlimited space. We're running out of space on the planet, and the space on the planet can be stale at sometimes.
Right. It's nowhere near as interesting as what we can invent.
Right. And I mean, man, I was hooked on World of Warcraft for years. And ever since then, I've been trying to chase the dragon. And ever since then, I've seen the quality of that game and the community and the incentive structures at the top corrupt. That was where the overall problem came down to, when the communities were left to thrive. Because like what you're talking about, it sounds like a guild. It sounds like, people within the space are looking at it. They see how big it's turning into. There's a certain amount of respect involved. There was a community within that game that was the focus. And after a certain amount of time, there was enough just nonsensical, like, games as a service type stuff, that you got some greasy lawyer talking about how are we going to get the whales into the game. Well, this isn't going to actually really reward the longtime users of the platform, but it's going to increase our overall revenue for our shareholders, right? And that might be the difference. That might be the difference, that you don't really have someone at the top of this platform that is beholden to shareholders. Their shareholders are the people in the platform, right?
Yeah. That's a very interesting question. Because I think, mandating and coding these things into the culture, like the 50-50 protocol, for example, that's a standard we want to actually advocate for in other social media platforms that are coming up, to encode it in from the front so that it's fully expected, right? So let's say, it's 2-3 years from now and somebody wants to give us $100 million for the platform. Like, are we going to sell? Probably. Right? Like, I mean, maybe, or, who knows? Kurt might just be like, fuck it, we're just going to keep going, which is totally possible.
Your hope at that point is that you don't feel a desire to, because their offer cannot.
So it just doesn't matter, right?
Yeah,
and that's
right.
I think about that all the time, right? Because this is by far the biggest project that I've ever been personally a part of, right? No!
I'm just gonna go to, because I'm out of battery.
All right. Well, and 2.5 hours later, or whatever it is.
Yeah, we've been going for.
We've been rocking and rolling.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for it, just because I think this is the kind of conversation that I absolutely love having around this, because this is sort of what keeps me driving to do it, why I wanted to do it in the first place. Totally lost my train of thought, though. See?
Yeah, you're saying that you get offered an acquisition offer.
Oh, so that the revenue sharing element of it is so embedded in the culture that it couldn't be stopped, or everyone would just leave. Does that make sense? Like the core elements of how we build the community. And I really want to hear from you at every stage, because I wasn't there for that World of Warcraft stuff. And I mean, that's how dreams die, right? Like, we can sort of have this when we're small and very nimble, which of course we're going to be for quite a while to come. I think it's easy to pivot, but encoding those things like Bitcoin did, and again, Bitcoin is pretty centralized now, but it's still undefeatable, which is nuts, right? Like the core conceit, the core idea of Bitcoin is still utterly revolutionary.
So here's the thing. Yeah. This is what I'm really like. I hope that maybe it's some kind of important thing that gets carried on. It might just be nonsense. In what made that game super special, like in the very first expansion, there's the dragon final boss that you have to spend months of your life getting to. It is such a hard thing to do. And when that guild kills the dragon, you go into the main city, and there's a herald who's yelling, this guild has done this thing for the horde. It's amazing. And its head is on a pike in the center of town, and everybody looks up at it, and they know, holy shit, these 10 people are insane. They are godlike at these games. That's essentially the scarcity, right? Like people respect that, and they wanted it. And it could only happen once, and it only happened once a month or something. And when it did, it was a huge event, and it gave people something to strive for, and it gave people a sense of fulfillment, and it drove them to be in the game. This game was crack. It took, like, I know so many people who lost their young adult lives to this. They dropped out of college to play it because it was so good. And this was before all of the dopamine driven markets that we see right now existed. So the difference between that and this is that when that guild killed the dragon, there was not an immediate, like, the people who created the game, other than their love for the game, they didn't see some sort of monetary reward. They saw the monetary reward when the shareholder quarter profit expanded, when the people were spending more money. So if it is that when people kill the dragon, that generates the income for the platform itself, that the people who own the platform are incentivized to have people killing the dragon in a way that is difficult, because what they wound up doing is that, like, later on they would allow people to buy, hey, if you give us $10, you're going to get this cool shiny cosmetic. And after a while, the cosmetics didn't matter anymore because you didn't have to put any effort into that end result.
Yeah, it has to be earned, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it has to be earned. And I think that might be the problem, is that you've got, like, whales that come through, because at the same time you've got that new aspect to the incentive structure, but you're not going to lose the fact that some people just have more based on having more.
Yeah. Okay. Let's dig into that, because that's really interesting. So having more, like, it's part of our business model at this point. I think it's safe to say, to attract brands like, say, Coca-Cola. Let's say we have 100,000 people on the platform. We're like, hey, you should buy some coins and use it to advertise, right? And so that top corner, that's where they can apply stuff that you will see, right? They can't buy position on a leaderboard. They can't buy, I'm not 100% sure what Kill the Dragon, how that translates yet, but it fucking has to, right? Like I've been thinking about ways to, like, whether it's a channel leaderboard or something, but like having some gamified mission, because initially, like going up against Twitter and Facebook is crazy, right? So our dragon is pulling enough people away from those platforms and enough of their time and attention on our platform instead of theirs, the other ones, that it creates a network effect that creates a runaway effect, right? Once there's enough people spending their time on Chirp instead of Twitter, the flippening happens, right? Or could happen.
Yeah.
So, like, figuring out the metrics or the actual actions that could accrue to, having some channel or group, right? Some guild, kind of win that month. I'm going to start doing that right off the bat. I'm going to be in charge of that. And I swear to, even if it's a shitty idea, I don't care. There will be a way to win every month. And I mean, we could start just as the sort of basic idea that whoever wins, right? That 50-50, what if it just went to them? Right? And again, like, I'd like to see it go to more people, but like, right?
Yeah. Well, I think having multiple different outlets for whatever community, because that was the thing. The game turned
like feed the bottom and feed the top, right? But you really do want to have people being able to build strategies in a decentralized way to go after an insanely large target that only one group hits.
It went from being a community-driven game to there's no longer any community. There's no longer any reason to get in and actually talk to people, because it's, that's the thing, is if you keep it worth their while to be engaged in their communities, and that has to be the ultimate goal.
Yep.
I'm trying to wonder exactly how, I don't really mind advertisement in the idea that, like, if you pass by a virtual reality sign of Coca-Cola and they've paid a massive amount of money for that sign to be there in, like, a New York Times Square, that's fine, because I can still go off down my street and be with the people and spend the time with the people that I want to be there with.
Right. So the sort of simplest version of that we're going to start with is your channel, right? Like, you create your channel or channels. where it is like a purpose-driven community based around an idea, whether it's your podcast or UBI. I mean, somebody's going to try to start a UBI channel. Maybe I should just like say like, hey, Scott, I'm saving this for you. If you don't come take it, then I'm just going to have to give it away. Because I think that would be really cool. But, having that so that there's that gamification, that tribe mentality as well. They're like, hey, the more people that we bring into this channel from Twitter, say, or like something like that, like the more, and quantifying that is going to be difficult, but probably, well, hopefully not insurmountable from a technical standpoint. But, whoever wins the most accrued energy and people from those other platforms, to have that be a winnable thing. But in the interim, it's basically going to be on us as content creators, as community drivers, to incentivize people to come and hang out on Chirp instead of somewhere else, right? Mm-hmm. Which is going to be interesting on its face.
Well, you also have the developer as well, like who's coding the dragon, who's coding the shiny thing of the month. Like it's I very much like the idea, and this is all very esoteric, because right now you're driven on this. The layout is what it is. It has a lot to evolve with. I see why you're reaching out to people, because the community is the most important part, and that's going to mean you need the people on there starting it.
Yep.
So, I love it. I do. And I need to be there if I have the faith that something like this will happen, because it's not going to happen without me and other people. So I'm going to take that link. I'm going to continue to look at it. And I have more things to say concerning this issue, so we can have like a part 2 with this. But
yes, please.
Is that you got all the basics out that you wanted to concerning.
Well, like where you took it, as usual, Seth the Amazing, was awesome, because like that gamification is critical. So like the smallest version of that is, right, the revenue that comes in from posting, because every time you post, let's say you're only allowed to post in channels when it starts, so we 2 coins go back to the Chirp account or whatever. Every time somebody posts, and 50% of that, and like whatever people spend on channels, whatever people spend on advertising with the little thing or whatever, right? 50% of that is going to go into a pot that's going to go to the community. So what if we said right off the bat, and again, I have to run all this past Kurt, but just as like a thought experiment, we take half of that, so 25% of the whole monthly activity, the monthly GDP. Stupid number on the site, and give it to the channel that has, I mean, the simplest is just the most activity, right? Like who's the biggest channel over the most used, or have different variabilities, right? So who's got the biggest channel, who's got the most activity in their channel, because they might be different, and just start giving resources back to the winners. And then is what I want to do. Like, I'm going to be celebrating the people that have successful channels like crazy. Like that, as a minister of culture, that's one of the biggest parts of my job. I am going to make heroes out of the Seths of the world. It's also something I really enjoy doing, because I think you're a badass, right? But that, like, we're going to need to elevate people. When you win, you also get an NFT that gives you special access to a winners only channel.
Right.
So we could vote on what the next one is.
You'll wind up, and you got 2 paths to go. You can have the one incentive structure to be esoteric, like status. People who played WoW didn't play WoW to get money at the end of it. Some of them did. You could sell accounts for thousands of dollars, but at the end of the day, you played it to play it. It makes more sense, though, to have a monetary incentive to come to the platform and engage with the community, because at the end of the month, boy, this community pot's going to go out. You will quickly wind up in a situation where a power hierarchy cements its place and is going to win every single month.
But that's the thing. What we incentivize each month does not have to stay the same. Right? So, because I agree, right? Like once you have power, it's easy to keep it. That's annoying. It doesn't serve the community, right? Because look, we don't want that. We don't want like the say Nifty Wizards, their community right off the bat, it's going to be ludicrous. Like their Telegram channel does like 5,000 posts a day minimum. It's stupid. And wait, here's what's really messed up. and Kurt just released this yesterday, and I still don't know how he did it. Every post that you do in their Telegram channel earns you dust, which is an in-game cryptocurrency that will allow you to do stuff. So you're just being there. And like all of this technology that he's developing for Nifty Wizards, like it's going to show up in Chirp at some point, right? So that's just going to be bonkers. Like we could see a day down the road where people are coming into the Shipple channel and just by their presence, just being there, they're earning this cryptocurrency that could buy you memes or whatever Shipple becomes. I don't know. I'm still playing with it, right? But any project could do that. Mana, for example, could do that as a way to sort of create some momentum around that. But yeah, like finding ways to make sure and finding people, frankly, like you that are going to be thinking about things in these terms, that have seen rot happen, that we could come in and incentivize, because I want to lift other people up. Like I don't. If somebody wins 3 times in a row, that room is just me and that person, right? Who might be Kurt. Like that's boring. I mean, we need to figure out ways to elevate other people as heroes, because that's what to me strengthens the whole system. Like there might be one superhero, fine, but I would rather have 100 demigods than one ruler.
Well, there was a reverence for, that guild, quote unquote. Part of, you don't want to make it easy, because then you start going into the issue of, part of what gives it value is that it is hard.
Yeah.
But I'm getting into some really tricky things there.
It's important, I think. Like this is where I want to see this go.
So I'm going to keep talking about it in this way that I don't think is helpful, but like they went into this issue. They were like, okay, so you have to get in and talk to people. What about people who are really antisocial? Well, now we're going to put in a tool that allows you to go and just find a dungeon with other people, which then removed you from going there yourself and putting more effort in. And then it turned into this weird grind, and the world itself and the taste of what it was fell away. The community fell away by making it easier. But I just had this idea, like, dude, Gen Z is going to meme a currency into value. They're going to like suddenly start trading it amongst themselves and be like, hey, let's just do this. Let's just do this.
That, honestly, like Shipple was a joke, dude.
Yeah.
Like I minted that token as a joke, and like you can still to this day, for the people that hold it, you could trade it for memes, you could trade it for other stuff. And that was always like it wanted, because of our monkey minds or something, it wants to become that thing that is the alternative and kind of like, just for us or whatever. Like, and like Doge kind of did it too, right? Like the stupid freaking dog meme, like has like $180 million, market cap or some stupidly large number. It's huge, right? And so I think you're totally right. And I mean, we're just starting to see the ramifications of what it means that you can mint your own token kind of anytime you want, right? Like if I can figure it out, I am not the sharpest spoon in the drawer. Like other people are also figuring it out. So then it becomes, if you could do that, and that's not scarce anymore, what is scarce? Functional, cohesive communities. Yeah. Like community is power, period, right? So that, to me, what we're doing here, having this discussion and finding the things that we get passionate about and finding ways to help, help us find meaning in gamification and tribes and stuff, like that might be kind of all the marbles.
Yeah. If you could ultimately reach the point where you create that scarcity and you make it valuable to have meaningful engagements, that's how you win. That's how you solve a lot of the these weird issues that we get into over and over and over and over and over. I'm gonna so like it's not live. Have you been past the wait list? You've got your own like slot already, right? Because
that actually doesn't exist yet. Like they basically rinse and repeat the whole platform every once in a while. So yeah, no, I'm going to be getting in with everybody else. We are talking about if you and I keep trying to get Kurt to like keep it relatively high. Like if you refer more than 50 people, you can reserve a channel. I would say like between you and me, because like nobody is paying attention to this. The 6 people here just pretend like you never heard this. The people that do this show, I mean, the dividend report is going to you, obviously, right? Those don't have like first right of refusal on your kind of own land space or whatever. But we're talking about maybe doing, because like hashtag memes, like that channel is going to be stupid. SpaceX is going to be insane. Like there's going to be valuable real estate off the jump. So what I was telling Kurt we should do before we launch is anybody that gets more than 50 referrals can actually reserve one, and get it before we launch. Because when we get there, I mean, there's going to be a land rush of people trying to buy as many channels as they possibly can, which is fine. They're also going to be sellable. So, somebody manages to get their hands on a brand that becomes really, really huge, and they actually want to come in and get it. You could, hold it over their heads for $1 million.
Okay. I'm gonna do my part here and research it and keep in touch. I'm glad I really did finally start talking to you about it. Have you had many discussions on your end about how not to come across as like trying to shill? Because
I don't worry about it.
Yeah.
That going to happen? Yes. But if I spent time thinking about that, I probably would never be able to overcome it. I would be constantly in analysis paralysis. So basically, it's something that is going to happen, right? Especially we're in pre-launch. Like the only thing we have to show people is like the sneak peeks that I'm showing you now. There will be detractors. There's always going to be detractors. When we hit 1,000 people on our waiting list, people were still like, nobody's really interested. Okay, right? When we have 10,000 people on the platform, people are going to be, man, that coin's not worth anything. Fine, right? When we have 1 million, there's going to be people doing the same thing. So I'm just never going to spend any time thinking about it at all. I'm just going to be really grateful when people like you bring it up, because it's going to be things that people feel sometimes. Mm-hmm. And by the time we're done talking, you're going to realize that's not what's happening.
Right.
And that's really, I think, all that we could do.
100%.
Just tell them to shut the fuck up. Just kidding.
I like the chirp too. Like, I mean,
it's so ruthless
for the boomers and for all of the unassociated. It will fit. It will fit into place. So like, yeah, 100%.
Like, we want to be that transition escape hatch, right?
Yeah. Hopefully, because God knows we need it. It's
on us to build it, dude. That's like, I'm handpicking people for a reason, and it's. Right now, because I like, we're obviously, Kurt and the team have this generalized core idea of how the economy is going to work, right? It's on us to build a better playground for us in this thing. The things that we want, the concerns that we have, the visions that we have for how to make a better future. I personally believe, I've seen it. Like, I don't believe it. I know it. They love that feedback, and that feedback very often ends up into the site. And if everyone feels the same way very, very strongly, it ends up being part of the site very quickly.
Right.
Which is pretty fun. Like that, you can't go to freaking MeWe and have that effect.
Right. I don't even know what MeWe is.
Amy Siskind was suggesting we all move off Facebook when we realized that they just don't care at all. And I mean, you can see that, like, the network effect. Like, I had to go back to Facebook because that's where all the people were. Like, this is not an easy challenge in any way, shape, or form. Like, every bit of that kill the dragon thing is real. Like, every bit of it. So
like what happened with Facebook, right? It turned into this thing that you'd come home from school, you talk about how your day was, you connect with your friends, and like your connections during the day just went into the evening. It extended your social capacity. Mm-hmm. And then it turned into this monster, this absolute monster. Everyone talks about politics, and the algorithm itself incentivizes that.
We talk about that in every single episode of ChirpCast. Like that, and this is one thing that, like, I know we're not going to do. We're not going to track anybody's information. So, like, semantically, what kind of posts you like, that kind of thing, we're just not going to do it. Which is our sort of level one way to not be incentivized to do that. But that algorithm literally finds out what people comment on the most, which means their eyeballs are stuck to the thing, and it's all negative, right? Mm. You don't see massive arguments going on underneath pictures of fucking sunshine, or even massive conversations, because they honestly don't care. They're agnostic as to what kind of conversation is happening. They just want to make sure that people are stuck on the site, and they know that if they flick you in the amygdala with stuff that you are afraid of or stuff that you hate, your monkey mind demands that you comment, right? Yep. And that you stick there. And learning to not do that was probably one of the hardest things I've ever learned how to do. But it is like the lowest ROI activity you can be partaking in as a human being. It's terrible. And so, Fred. Do you know Fred? Fred Eater. He does the Fred's Front Porch.
I don't think so, no.
Oh, man, you got to meet him. He came on the Moving Forward podcast, and he was so effing adorable and has such an amazing radio voice that Rio and I said, you have to start a podcast. We don't care if it's reading the phone book. But it turns out he's really freaking good at it. Like the audio quality, it's he's like Radio Lab quality good. It's stupid. So when I had him, he's the first episode of ChirpCast, and he basically said like, what if I have a channel and there's like people shit posting? Because right now, like comments are free, right? And I'm actually advocating to have that be manageable by the channel owner, right? So you can post whatever you want, right? And anybody in the community can do that. And of course, you'll have control over that as like an admin or whatever, right? Like a Facebook group kind of situation. But anyone who wants to comment on that, commenting right now is set to free. Right, so anyone can comment as many times as they want. What's really cool is like somebody with no coins can go in and comment, and if the comment's really good and they get a like, that coin is still going to them. Right, so it's still a way to kind of produce revenue, even if you don't want to spend any coins. But Fred said, "Well, could I set it to be like one coin to comment, and that way, if people wanted to come in and call me an asshole 100 times, I'd be like, cha-ching."
I'm making money. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And it kind of disincentivizes it. Like, how much do you want to tell a person they're shitty while giving them coins?
So
right?
Yeah, you got Twitch, right? And like there's the same kind of thing. You can set it to followers only, where if you're sending me money, you can talk. So I mean, do you know who Recful is?
No.
I would that has really dominated a lot of my mental space. He is someone who really was influential in setting up the structure of donations on Twitch. He was like one of the first pioneers in how to like make Twitch something you can live off of or something you can make money from. He killed himself on July 4th. July 2nd. And it was really, really rough because he was clearly going through a lot of like mental issues, and people were constantly telling him every single day to kill himself on Twitch. And like I have glorified Twitch on my channel, and I've glorified the idea that you can make money online and everything. But like it was very clear to me, like, and I've had to readjust my entire perspective because it killed him. It winded up in his death. And what people who, and he even being a part of it, they probably envisioned nothing but greatness from Twitch, But if you're not careful, this does affect people. It does affect people's lives.
I kind of feel like it's because I don't know know how to solve this problem, right? And I think it's the sort of problem of our time to look at this. Because we now have this really asymmetrical power, and like level one for me is okay. Well, the people that show up first, like their culture, their ethics, their vision for the future is going to be enhanced. It's going to be celebrated a lot, right? Like positive feedback loops for that. I sort of am taking it upon myself to just be the amplifier for the good in that way, and hopefully that sort of becomes part of just how we operate. But I mean, once you have 1 million people, I mean, the assholes are going to show up, right? It's only a matter of time. So
yeah, and the communities build themselves in some way,
and they do, especially because we're like isolating everything in different channels and stuff, right? So I guess what I would love to see is some kind of human powered feedback loop, where maybe some people, and maybe this is gamified, right? Kind of get voted in to maybe be arbiters or something. I don't know, right? Like something like that. Like figure out a way to just find good people with really giant hearts. And again, like there's like 9,000 problems, even as I'm like saying this out loud, right? Because who knows what that looks like.
Okay, do you know a Healthy Gamer on Twitch? If you knew about them, you would know about he's a psychologist who doesn't practice psychology with his patients or like with the people he talks with online, but he just kind of talks to them. And he was big in talking to Recful about his mental illness, his bipolar and everything. And he did. I'm going to send it over to you. It's a long listen. You may not want to listen to it today. Please get to it because I made it sound really bad, and I do think that that is there. But good exists, and it's this channel. And he says, I have never seen any of you act toxic. We open up to each other here. And so good can exist on the platform itself. I think I gave the platform too much power there.
No, I think, and this is the sort of the thread or the needle we're trying to thread, right? Mm-hmm. What social media has done is connected us all. right? And if you do that intentionally, really amazing things can happen. Which maybe that's sort of the core, cultural thing that we could maybe try and help each other to imbue, like the humanity first thing or whatever. Be intentional. You with this channel, you have power, right? The community that you make here has power and will empower other people with whatever it starts out as, right? And so whatever you keep feeding into that, right? In those two different channels on Twitch, you can absolutely do the good, or you can just kind of do whatever, right? And sometimes that will incentivize the bad because it'll get you more attention. But I think if we're all as examples, paying attention to that, talking about that intentionality, and again, celebrating the channels where like, oh my God, this is so much fun here, right?
Right.
And finding out ways to find channels that aren't doing that. And I mean, I don't know if we want to disincentivize them or if the culture itself can do that. Again, these are open questions that we'll have to look into, right? But I do think this is a way where we can have a really outsized impact, right? And I get a little excited about that. I'm not gonna lie. Now, if I had a lot of coffee today, fucking right side.
Yeah, for sure. Me too as well. Dude, thank you so much for having me on. And again, what you're doing is helping me get the energy to continue moving on. So yeah, hopefully this can be the start of those own reverberations out there, because it can happen. I believe in it. And we've learned from the mistakes of the 2 decades before us, and the internet 2.0 is going to hopefully correct those mistakes. And you're leading the charge. I love it.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I mean, we're not going to get everything right. I could promise that without a shadow of a doubt. But I firmly believe it's going to be better. Like from the jump, the core conceit means that it's going to be better. But my hope is that bringing in people like you, Seth, and if you go back and listen to the first like 7 episodes, you can hear this intention everywhere, even when we're not explicitly bringing it up. Like it's all over the place. So I spend half my days thinking about what it's like when we have 100 episodes of this and 100 communities, and somebody just frickin' killed the dragon, which maybe is what the monthly thing might have to be called, right?
Right.
How do exactly. How do you beat the horde of dragons that is Facebook, one dragon at a time, motherfucker? So that might just be how that ends up having to happen. But yeah, we're gonna do good at the very least, and the next 20 years are going to be better than the last 20 years.
100%. I honestly think 5 years. I think the only reason the Federal Reserve is printing this much money is because they're trying to stop Bitcoin right now from taking over, because everyone's about to get like antsy. And I don't know. I think it's near
that. I think that flippening is not that close, because there's so much power and momentum, like human momentum in that legacy story. But I think in the next 10 to 20 years, it's inevitable. And it's not going to be Bitcoin. I'll tell you that right now. Like Bitcoin is not as good as people think it is. It's just it's the DOS. It worked, right? And it's going to work until Windows shows up and shows everybody that Bitcoin isn't that cool.
Wouldn't you agree that they are trying their hardest not to let 2008 happen again? Because if it did, like, it's done.
That's not why they're doing it. They're doing it because they think Trump explicitly thinks it'll protect him, and he's not really wrong, right? And if you're Goldman Sachs and someone says, hey, we want to give you $500 billion so that your books look better at the end of the year, you're going to take it? Of course you are, right? And I do this a lot, but the Asimov quote, never ascribe to malice what can be explained by ineptitude. That's not usually the word, but I can't remember what it is right now. But you get it, right?
Yeah.
It's just people taking very simple, quite frankly, very dumb and short-sighted, but very easily incentivized moves in a game that they are allowed to rig.
Yep. That's what it comes down to. I agree. All right, man. Dude, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. And
this is fun. Yeah, no, 2.0 is going to have to happen like that. Yeah, I think as soon as you want to do it, maybe like the day after launch or something, we'll have it on. If you have any thoughts about the gamification, the way that worked, or if you want to explain how it worked and how it failed, like that's my new obsession starting today. Because I love it.
100%. I'm going, when we're done with this, I'm going to go and look at ChirpCast or I mean, sorry, Chirp. Chirple is the coin. Chirp is the
coins is going to be the currency or token.
Okay, the token.
Yeah,
Right.
it's called coins. So you can't actually get to the website.
I'm going to look at the link that you sent me.
That link is just hey, do you want to get on the waiting list? And then you say yes because duh. And then that actually will give you a referral link. You need to send that referral link to me so that I can tag it when I release this, which is probably going to be in 2 days.
Gotcha. And then I'm going to continue to hopefully keep up with ChirpCast and follow along with what you're doing. And I'll send you over things as they come.
Love it. All right, guys. Thanks for hanging out with us all day.
Yeah. We got another hour when we go into the third podcast, so stay tuned.
All right.
I'm kidding. Dude, well done. That was a long podcast.
Yeah, it's good stuff.